In this video, we are going to work through one wild theory for every Family Guy character. Let's get started. First up is Peter Griffin and the mental institution theory. The Peter Griffin mental institution theory ranks among the most haunting fan readings of Family Guy to come out of the internet. It offers a heartbreaking explanation for how the Griffin family can survive impossible situations without ever facing real consequences, arguing that every moment of the show takes place only inside Peter's broken mind. The tragic truth behind the fantasy. The theory holds that Peter Griffin is actually locked away in a mental institution, having suffered a total psychological collapse after losing his entire family in a chain of tragedies. Under this reading, the loud, absurd, colorful world of Family Guy that we watch on television is nothing more than an elaborate fantasy Peter has built to survive a reality he cannot bear. Everything on screen is unfolding inside Peter's head as he sits in a hospital, unable to confront what really became of his family. The night that changed everything. In the real world, Meg Griffin was not the awkward, unattractive teenager mocked by everyone around her. She was a beautiful, popular girl in the prime of her high school years. She shared a special bond with her younger brother, Chris, who lived with a mental disability caused by oxygen deprivation at birth. Meg loved Chris deeply and felt protective of him, unable to stand that he never received the same attention and love from their parents that she did. One fateful night, Meg took Chris to a party. She wanted to show him a good time and help him feel included. In her drunken state, she got behind the wheel and caused a devastating car crash that killed both siblings instantly. The tragedy did not end there. Lois Griffin, pregnant with Stewie at the time, learned of the deaths of her two children and was consumed by grief. The pain of losing Meg and Chris was more than she could bear. Unable to cope with the overwhelming loss, Lois took her own life along with the life of her unborn son. Suddenly, Peter found himself completely alone, having lost his wife, his two children, and the baby he would never get to meet. The weight of that trauma was more than any person could reasonably carry. In a single night, everything Peter had ever loved was torn away from him. His entire world collapsed. Peter's descent into madness. Unable to handle the deaths of everyone he had ever loved, Peter's mind shattered. He slipped slowly into insanity and was eventually committed to a mental institution. Rather than face the horrible truth of what had happened, Peter's psyche constructed an elaborate fantasy world where his family was still alive, where he could still come home to a house full of people, where everything could still be okay. The Family Guy that audiences watch is this fantasy playing out inside Peter's head. Every episode is Peter imagining scenarios where his family is together. Every adventure they go on, every problem they solve, every moment of their lives is just Peter's desperate attempt to keep them alive in his mind. He creates a world where death is temporary, where consequences do not matter, where his family can never truly be taken from him because they exist in a reality he controls. Why Meg suffers so much. The theory explains many of the show's strangest elements through this lens. In Peter's fantasy world, Meg is treated terribly by everyone, constantly bullied and belittled. Her family mocks her appearance. Her friends abandon her. Strangers treat her with contempt. This harsh treatment reflects Peter's subconscious resentment toward her. Deep down, even in his delusion, Peter cannot forget that Meg was responsible for the drunk driving accident that killed Chris and set off the chain of events that destroyed his family. He punishes the imagined version of Meg because some part of him still blames her for everything that went wrong. Even though he knows it was an accident, even though he knows Meg loved Chris and would never have hurt him on purpose, the anger is still there. In his fantasy, he makes Meg suffer the way he suffers. She becomes the family scapegoat, the one everyone can blame and mock without consequence. However, the theory also accounts for those rare moments when Peter shows genuine compassion toward Meg. These brief flashes of kindness represent glimpses of what their relationship was like before the tragedy, small windows into the real affection Peter felt for his daughter when she was still alive. In episodes like Seahorse Seashell Party, when Meg stands up for herself and the family briefly treats her better, we see traces of the real Meg shining through Peter's distorted fantasy. Even in his madness, fragments of his true feelings occasionally break through the resentment. Stewie, the son Peter never met. Stewie Griffin's character takes on an entirely different meaning under this interpretation. Peter never got to meet his youngest son. Stewie died before he was even born, existing only as a possibility that was never realized. In his fantasy, Peter imagines Stewie as a ridiculously intelligent, sophisticated baby genius. This reflects Peter's hopes and dreams for what his son might have become. Peter wanted to believe that Stewie had enormous potential, that he would have grown into someone extraordinary. The baby's genius-level intellect and advanced capabilities represent all the promise and possibility that was stolen when Lois took both their lives. Stewie builds time machines and elaborate inventions because Peter imagines his son would have been capable of anything. Stewie speaks with a British accent and uses sophisticated vocabulary because Peter dreams his son would have been refined and educated. Stewie's often stated desire to kill Lois in the show's earlier seasons also makes tragic sense through this lens. That murderous hatred toward Lois is actually a projection of Peter's own anger. On some level, Peter is furious with Lois for choosing to end her life and take Stewie with her, rather than finding a way to keep living. He cannot understand or forgive that choice. Why didn't she stay? Why didn't she try to move forward? Why did she take away his chance to know his son? The imagined version of Stewie carries this rage on Peter's behalf. When Stewie plots to kill Lois, when he builds weapons aimed at destroying her, he is acting out Peter's darkest feelings. And yet, as the show progresses, and Stewie becomes softer and more loving toward Lois, this might represent Peter slowly working through his anger, gradually finding forgiveness for his wife's choice. Peter's self-image as a fool. The theory even explains Peter's own characterization in the show. In the real world, Peter was intelligent and capable. He held down jobs, provided for his family, and functioned as a normal adult. But in his fantasy, he portrays himself as a bumbling idiot, constantly making mistakes and causing problems. This transformation reflects Peter's profound sense of failure. He believes he failed as a father and as a husband. If he had been smarter, stronger, better somehow, maybe he could have prevented the tragedy. Maybe he could have stopped Meg from driving drunk. Maybe he could have convinced Lois to keep living. Maybe he could have kept his family safe. His self-image as a fool is a form of self-punishment, a way of expressing his belief that he should have been able to stop what happened. Peter Griffin is described throughout the show as lazy, obnoxious, rude, arrogant, short-tempered, selfish, uncaring, childish, immature, stubborn, dim-witted, and reckless. An IQ test in the episode. Petarded places Peter's intellect below the level of being mentally challenged. His mental shortcomings have resulted in various accidents affecting other people, including the death of his stepfather, Francis Griffin, and multiple injuries to his wife, Lois. His attention span is remarkably short, and he often forgets important information moments after learning it. All of these traits could be explained as manifestations of Peter's deteriorating mental state in the institution. His mind is becoming increasingly unstable and chaotic as his fantasy world grows more elaborate and harder to maintain. The longer he stays trapped in his delusion, the more his grip on reality slips. His behavior becomes more erratic, his decisions more nonsensical, his actions more destructive. Cleveland and Quagmire, visitors from reality. Peter's best friends, Cleveland and Quagmire, are real people in this interpretation. They were Peter's neighbors and friends before the tragedy, and they continue to visit him in the mental hospital where he is confined. Their appearances in the fantasy represent these visits. They sit with their old friend and try to humor him, attempting to connect with Peter even though he is lost in his delusions. When Cleveland and Quagmire appear in the show, they are actually sitting beside Peter in the hospital, listening to him talk about his imaginary adventures. They play along, hoping that someday Peter might find his way back to reality. They are loyal friends who refuse to abandon Peter, even though he no longer recognizes the real world around him. During one of these visits, Cleveland and Quagmire told Peter about a new neighbor who had moved into the house next door, a man named Joe Swanson. Joe was a police officer with a wife, a son, and a baby on the way. Peter had never actually met Joe before being institutionalized, but Cleveland and Quagmire described him as a strong, heroic, devoted father and husband who unconditionally loved his family despite being paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. Joe Swanson, the man Peter wishes he could be. Peter incorporated Joe into his fantasy, using him as a representation of the kind of man Peter wishes he had been. Joe is everything Peter feels he failed to be. He is strong and protective, capable of keeping his family safe, even with physical limitations. He is a police officer who saves people and fights criminals. He is a devoted husband who loves his wife and a caring father who protects his children. Joe represents the ideal of what Peter thinks a good father and husband should look like, the kind of person who could have prevented the tragedy that destroyed Peter's real life. Joe can still be heroic despite being in a wheelchair, still be strong despite his disability. This shows that Peter believes his own failings were not about physical capability, but about character and strength of will. In the show, Joe displays incredible fighting abilities despite being paralyzed. He defeats multiple opponents, performs amazing physical feats, and never lets his wheelchair stop him from being a hero. This is Peter's way of showing himself what he should have been capable of. If Joe can protect his family from a wheelchair, Peter should have been able to protect his family with full use of his body. The Cleveland Show explanation. The theory even accounts for the Cleveland Show, the Family Guy spin-off. According to the interpretation, Cleveland visited Peter more frequently than Quagmire did. During these visits, Cleveland would indulge Peter's fantasy, playing along with his delusions in an attempt to bring some comfort to his suffering friend. He would listen to Peter's stories, agree with his made-up adventures, and participate in the imaginary world Peter had created. However, over time, Cleveland began to feel himself losing touch with reality as well. The line between Peter's fantasy and the real world started to blur for Cleveland. He found himself thinking about Peter's imaginary scenarios even when he was not at the hospital. He started to wonder if maybe Peter's fantasy was real. He began to lose himself in the delusion alongside his friend. Frightened by this, Cleveland made the difficult decision to stop visiting Peter. He could not let himself get pulled into Peter's madness. He needed to stay grounded in reality. In Peter's mind, this disappearance manifested as Cleveland moving away to Virginia, spawning the entire narrative of the Cleveland Show. As Peter's imagination filled in the absence of his friend, Cleveland didn't really move away. He simply stopped coming to visit. But Peter couldn't accept that his friend had abandoned him, so he created a story where Cleveland was just somewhere else, still living his life, still okay. Why nothing has real consequences. The theory provides a dark explanation for the show's increasingly absurd scenarios. Peter constantly puts himself and his family through ridiculous, often dangerous situations in his fantasy world. They fight giant chickens in extended battles that destroy entire city blocks. They travel through time and space. They meet celebrities and historical figures. They survive explosions, gunshots, falls from great heights, and countless other injuries that would kill normal people. These scenarios reflect Peter's real-life guilt over failing to protect his family. But unlike in reality, things always work out okay in the fantasy. No matter what happens, the family survives and stays together. Characters who die in one episode reappear perfectly fine in the next. Injuries heal instantly. Buildings destroyed one day are intact the next. There are no lasting consequences because Peter won't allow there to be. Since Peter's real family never got a happy ending, he gives them one in his imagination. He rewrites reality over and over, creating scenarios where his family faces danger, but always makes it through safely, always stays together, always gets to be okay. He is rewriting the accident over and over, changing the ending each time. In his fantasy, crashes don't kill people. Bad things can happen, but they never take away what matters most: the meaning behind cutaway gags. The show's signature cutaway gags take on new significance under this theory. In Family Guy, these random flashback sequences typically begin with a character saying something like, "This is worse than the time," before cutting to an unrelated scene. The scene plays out for a few seconds or minutes, then the show returns to the main story. These gags are implied to be stories made up by the characters that didn't actually happen. In the context of the mental institution theory, these cutaways could represent Peter's fractured, unstable mental state. His mind jumps erratically between different thoughts and memories. Unable to maintain a coherent narrative, he constantly fragments into random tangents and imagined scenarios. His thoughts don't flow in a logical order. Instead, they bounce from one topic to another without warning or connection. This is how many people experience severe mental illness or trauma. Their minds can't stay focused on one thing. They jump between past memories, present fears, and imagined futures. They create elaborate scenarios that never happened. They lose track of what's real and what they've invented. Peter's cutaway gags show a mind that can no longer distinguish between fantasy and reality, between what actually happened and what he wishes had happened. There are even hints within the show itself that acknowledge mental institutions. In the episode Guy, Robot, Peter and his friends actually visit a place called the Brookfield Insane Asylum while searching for Peter's old mattress. The show has flirted with the idea of Peter being institutionalized, even if only as a throwaway joke. But according to this theory, it's not a joke at all. It's Peter's subconscious acknowledging where he really is. A psychological perspective. Mental health professionals have noted that fan theories like the Peter Griffin mental institution theory can serve as a catalyst for meaningful discussions about mental health and the ways media represents these issues. Such theories can help reduce stigma around conversations about grief, trauma, and coping strategies, encouraging viewers to seek support and understanding in their own lives. The theory transforms Family Guy from mindless entertainment into a meditation on how the human mind deals with unbearable loss. It shows how people create alternate realities when the real world becomes too painful to face. It demonstrates the power of denial, the strength of delusion, and the desperate lengths the human mind will go to in order to protect itself from trauma it cannot process. Peter's fantasy world is both tragic and beautiful. It's tragic because it isn't real, because he's lost in a delusion he can never escape. But it's beautiful because it shows the depth of his love for his family. He loved them so much that he couldn't let them go. He loved them so much that he rebuilt them in his mind. He loved them so much that he destroyed his own sanity rather than face a world without them. Why this theory resonates? The enduring appeal of this theory lies in how completely it recontextualizes the show. Every joke becomes laden with tragedy. Every absurd scenario becomes evidence of a mind trying desperately to escape from horror. Every moment of the family together becomes both beautiful and heartbreaking, because viewers know it's all an illusion, a fantasy constructed by a broken man who lost everything. When Peter and Lois share a tender moment, it's Peter remembering how much he loved his wife. When Peter plays with Chris, it's Peter imagining the son he lost. When Peter holds Stewie, it's Peter trying to know the child he never got to meet. Every family dinner, every holiday celebration, every ordinary day is Peter's way of keeping his family alive. Since Peter's real family never got a happy ending, he tries to create one in his mind over and over again. And that, according to the theory, is really all that Peter Griffin ever wanted. He wanted his family to be safe. He wanted them to be together. He wanted everything to be okay. The entire elaborate construction of Family Guy, with all its impossible scenarios and cartoon violence and musical numbers, is just one man's desperate attempt to undo what cannot be undone, to bring back what has been lost forever. The power of fan interpretation. The Peter Griffin mental institution theory may not be canon, and the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has never suggested anything like it was intended. The show was created as a comedy meant to make people laugh with its outrageous humor and silly situations. But the power of this theory comes from how well it fits, how it transforms scattered elements of the show into a cohesive, tragic narrative. It offers viewers a way to see the show through a completely different lens, where every silly joke carries the weight of unspeakable loss, and every happy ending is really just a desperate fantasy playing out in the mind of a man who couldn't face his reality. The theory demonstrates how audiences engage with media in creative and unexpected ways, finding deeper meaning in content that was designed purely for entertainment. Whether viewers accept this interpretation or reject it entirely, the theory has become an inseparable part of Family Guy's cultural legacy, a dark shadow that lurks beneath the show's bright, cartoonish surface. It reminds us that sometimes the stories we tell ourselves to cope with pain can become more real than reality itself, and that laughter and tears often exist closer together than we'd like to admit. It shows us that comedy and tragedy are two sides of the same coin, and that sometimes the funniest jokes are the ones that hide the deepest pain. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Lois Griffin and the Purgatory Theory. Lois Griffin, trapped in her own personal hell. Lois Griffin appears to have it all on the surface. She's an attractive woman with a family, a house in suburban Rhode Island, and a life that should be comfortable. But according to a popular fan theory, Lois is actually living in purgatory, trapped in a loveless marriage and a mundane existence as punishment for the sins she committed during her actual lifetime. Every frustration she faces, every humiliation she endures, and every moment of disappointment in her life is not random. It's deliberate punishment designed to make her pay for who she used to be, the woman Lois used to be. In her real life, before she ended up in this purgatory, Lois was a completely different person. She was vain, shallow, and obsessed with her own beauty and status. She came from an extremely wealthy family, the Pewterschmidts, who had money, power, and influence. Lois grew up surrounded by luxury and privilege. She had access to the finest things in life and never wanted for anything material. But Lois didn't use her advantages to help others or make the world better. Instead, she used her beauty and her body as tools to manipulate people and get what she wanted. She was promiscuous, engaging in relationships with multiple men without regard for their feelings or situations. She specifically targeted married men, breaking up families and destroying marriages without any guilt or concern for the wives and children she was hurting. Lois was obsessed with fashion, always needing to have the latest designer clothes and the most expensive accessories. She cared deeply about her position in social hierarchies, constantly seeking to climb higher and associate with more important people. She looked down on those she considered beneath her station. She valued appearances over substance, caring more about how things looked than how they actually were. Her beauty gave her power, and she wielded that power carelessly. Men wanted her, and she knew it. She used their desire to manipulate them into giving her what she wanted, whether it was money, gifts, access to exclusive events, or simply the ego boost of knowing she could have anyone she desired. She left a trail of broken hearts and destroyed relationships in her wake, never looking back to see the damage she had caused. The punishment begins. According to the purgatory theory, when Lois died, she was sent to a place designed specifically to punish her for these sins. But this isn't the fire and brimstone version of hell. Instead, it's a more subtle and psychological punishment. She's been placed in a situation that is the exact opposite of everything she valued in life. The wealthy heiress who once had access to unlimited money is now trapped in a lower middle-class existence. The woman who wore designer clothes and attended fancy parties now shops at regular stores and struggles to make ends meet. The socialite who associated with powerful and important people now lives in a modest house on Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, surrounded by ordinary neighbors. Most importantly, the woman who used her beauty to attract and manipulate men, who had her pick of wealthy and successful partners, is now married to Peter Griffin. Peter is overweight, unintelligent, irresponsible, and often unemployed or underemployed. He's crude, embarrassing, and frequently puts the family in financial jeopardy with his foolish schemes and impulsive decisions. He's the complete opposite of the type of man Lois would have chosen when she was alive, trapped in a loveless marriage. The marriage between Lois and Peter is a central part of her punishment. In her real life, Lois could have had anyone. She was beautiful and came from a wealthy family. She could have married a successful businessman, a handsome celebrity, or another member of the upper class. Instead, she's bound to Peter, a man who embodies everything she once looked down upon. Peter is not sophisticated or refined. He doesn't understand high culture or appreciate the finer things in life. He prefers beer and television to wine and opera. He's happy with a simple existence that would have horrified the real Lois. He's often thoughtless and selfish, creating problems that Lois has to solve. He embarrasses her in public with his crude behavior and ignorant comments. The loveless aspect of the marriage is particularly cruel. Lois can't leave Peter. She's trapped in this relationship as part of her punishment. She must stay married to him, must continue playing the role of his wife, must continue dealing with his foolishness and immaturity. There's no escape, no divorce, no way out. This is her eternity, or at least her time in purgatory, until she has learned her lesson and paid for her sins. Throughout the show, Lois frequently expresses frustration with Peter. She yells at him, criticizes him, and complains about his behavior. She often seems exhausted and exasperated by his antics. These aren't just normal marital frustrations. They're the result of being forced to spend eternity with someone who represents everything she once despised. The wealthy heiress forced to struggle. Another crucial aspect of Lois's punishment involves money. In her real life, Lois was born into the Pewterschmidt family, one of the wealthiest families in America. She never had to worry about bills or budgets. She could buy whatever she wanted without checking price tags. She lived in mansions, traveled in private jets, and enjoyed every luxury imaginable. In purgatory, all of that has been taken away. Lois is now a housewife struggling to make ends meet on Peter's inconsistent income. The family frequently faces financial problems. They worry about paying bills, affording groceries, and keeping their modest house. When things break, they often can't afford to fix them properly. They live paycheck to paycheck, never knowing when Peter might lose his job or make another expensive mistake. This financial struggle is particularly painful for Lois because she knows what she's missing. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, still exists in this purgatory world, still wealthy and successful. Lois sees what she could have had, what she was born into, what should have been her birthright, but she can't access it. Her father often looks down on Peter and makes it clear that he thinks Lois married beneath her station. This constant reminder of what she's lost makes the punishment even more severe. The show frequently depicts Lois trying to maintain some semblance of her former standards while living in reduced circumstances. She wants nice things, but can't afford them. She wants to be part of high society, but is stuck in middle-class suburbia. She wants the respect and status she once had, but is now just another housewife in Quahog, forced to be a housewife and mother. In her real life, Lois was free and independent. She could do whatever she wanted, go wherever she pleased, and live entirely for herself. She didn't have responsibilities or obligations. She certainly didn't have to take care of other people's needs before her own. In Purgatory, she's been forced into the role of housewife and mother. She has 3 children who demand her constant attention and care. Meg is an insecure teenager who needs guidance and support. Chris is not very bright and requires help with schoolwork and life skills. Stewie is a baby who needs constant supervision. Being a mother means putting their needs before her own, sacrificing her time and energy for their benefit. This is particularly difficult for someone as selfish as Lois was in life. She must clean the house, cook meals, do laundry, and handle all the domestic tasks she once would have had servants to do. She must be available to her children whenever they need her. She must attend school meetings, help with homework, and solve their problems. She must be responsible and reliable when she once was carefree and self-centered. The role of housewife and mother is the opposite of the glamorous, exciting life Lois once led. There's nothing fashionable about scrubbing toilets or folding laundry. There's nothing prestigious about packing school lunches or driving kids to activities. There's nothing enviable about being covered in baby spit-up or dealing with teenage drama. It's mundane, repetitive, and often thankless work. The contrast with her former life. The show occasionally gives glimpses into Lois's past, showing who she was before her marriage to Peter. These flashbacks reveal a wild, party-loving young woman who dated rock stars and engaged in reckless behavior. She was part of the glamorous music scene in the 1980s, hanging out with famous bands and living an exciting life. Lois had relationships with various musicians and celebrities. She dated Jay Giles from the Jay Giles Band. She had connections with Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. She knew Gene Simmons from Kiss. She was part of that world of fame, parties, drugs, and rock and roll. She traveled with bands, attended exclusive concerts, and lived the kind of life most people only dream about. She was also a talented musician herself. Lois played piano and was good enough to potentially have a career in music, but she was more interested in the party lifestyle than in developing her talents. She wanted the glamour and excitement without the work and discipline required to truly succeed. In Purgatory, all of that is gone. The rock stars have been replaced by Peter Griffin. The concerts and parties have been replaced by PTA meetings and grocery shopping. The excitement and glamour have been replaced by the dull routine of suburban family life. Lois can remember what she had, which makes the loss even more painful. Her dark side still shows through. Throughout the show, Lois occasionally reveals the darker aspects of her personality, the parts that reflect who she really was before ending up in Purgatory. She has a violent streak, capable of brutal fighting when necessary. In the episode Lethal Weapons, she learns martial arts and becomes extremely dangerous. This violent capability suggests that Lois was not just vain and promiscuous in life, but potentially cruel and capable of hurting others. Lois also has addictive tendencies. She once had a kleptomaniac phase where she couldn't stop stealing things. She's shown signs of gambling addiction when exposed to casinos. She smoked marijuana while pregnant with Stewie. According to creator Seth MacFarlane's comments, she has a history with various drugs. These addictions reflect someone who was always chasing the next thrill, the next high, never satisfied with what she had. She's also capable of extreme selfishness. Lois has stolen from her own family, lied to get what she wants, and manipulated situations to her benefit. She's had affairs during her marriage to Peter, showing that even in purgatory, she hasn't fully learned her lesson about fidelity and respect for relationships. She's forced Peter into sexual situations against his will, demonstrating a disturbing lack of respect for consent. These dark moments reveal that Lois is not in purgatory by mistake. She's there because she genuinely was a bad person who hurt others and lived only for herself. The punishment fits the crime. Why this theory makes sense. The purgatory theory for Lois explains many contradictions in her character. She's clearly intelligent and talented, so why did she marry someone like Peter? She comes from incredible wealth, so why does she stay in a financially struggling household? She's beautiful and could have many options, so why does she remain in an unhappy marriage? The answer is that she doesn't have a choice. This is her punishment, and she must endure it until she's learned her lesson. Purgatory is meant to purify souls, to make them confront their sins and change their ways. Lois must learn to be selfless instead of selfish, to value substance over appearance, to appreciate what she has instead of constantly wanting more. The theory also explains why Lois has become increasingly frustrated and angry as the show has progressed. In early seasons, she was more patient and understanding, but as time goes on, she's become sharper, meaner, and more willing to lash out at her family. This could represent her growing frustration with her punishment, her inability to change her situation, and her anger at being trapped in this life forever. She's a wealthy heiress, forced to count pennies. She's a beautiful woman stuck with an embarrassing husband. She's a selfish person, forced to care for others. She's a social climber trapped in middle-class suburbia. Every aspect of her current existence is designed to punish her for who she was, to make her experience the opposite of everything she valued. Learning her lesson. Purgatory isn't meant to be permanent. It's a place where souls are purified so they can eventually move on to something better. The question is whether Lois is learning her lesson. Is she becoming a better person? Is she understanding why her former behavior was wrong? The evidence is mixed. Lois does show genuine love for her children and occasionally for Peter. She sacrifices for her family and works hard to keep them together. She's capable of selflessness and kindness. These moments suggest that the punishment is working, that she's changing and growing. But she also continues to display her old tendencies. She's still vain about her appearance. She still cares about social status. She still has affairs and engages in selfish behavior. She's still materialistic and wants expensive things. These moments suggest that she hasn't fully learned her lesson, that she's still the same person she was in life. Perhaps that's why her purgatory continues. She'll remain trapped in this existence until she truly changes, until she genuinely becomes the selfless, caring person she needs to be. Only then will she be released from her punishment and allowed to move on to whatever comes next. The theory transforms Lois from a simple sitcom wife into a complex figure paying for past sins, struggling to change while fighting against her own nature, trapped in circumstances designed specifically to punish and reform her. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Meg Griffin and the Secret Mother Theory. Meg Griffin, the dark secret she's been hiding. Meg Griffin is treated terribly by almost everyone in her life. Her family mocks her constantly. Her father openly despises her. Her mother barely acknowledges her existence. Her brothers join in the abuse. Strangers insult her appearance. Classmates bully her relentlessly. She's portrayed as the family punching bag, the one person everyone can safely attack without consequence. But according to a disturbing fan theory, there's a reason for this cruelty that goes far deeper than simple meanness. Meg isn't just Stewie's older sister. She needed help, but she didn't know where to turn. That's when Lois and Brian stepped in. Somehow they discovered what was happening. Perhaps Meg confided in Brian first, knowing he was often more understanding than the rest of the family. Perhaps Lois noticed physical signs of the pregnancy that Meg couldn't hide. However they found out, they decided to help Meg cover up the pregnancy and pretend the baby was actually Lois's child. The cover-up begins. The plan was elaborate and required careful coordination. Lois would pretend to be pregnant at the same time Meg actually was. They would hide Meg's pregnancy through careful clothing choices and by keeping her away from situations where people might notice. When the time came for Meg to give birth, they would claim Lois had delivered the baby. Stewie would be registered as Lois and Peter's child, not Meg's. Brian played a crucial role in this deception. As the family's most intelligent member and the one with the most resources outside the home, Brian could help arrange things the family couldn't handle alone. Some versions of the theory suggest Brian paid off Dr. Hartman, the family's doctor, to keep quiet about what really happened. Dr. Hartman would have known the truth when he delivered the baby. He would have known it was Meg giving birth, not Lois. Money or threats would have been necessary to buy his silence. The logistics of hiding a teenage pregnancy are complicated. Meg would have had to continue attending school without anyone noticing her condition. She would have needed prenatal care without arousing suspicion. She would have had to deliver the baby somewhere private where the secret could be maintained. All of this would have required significant planning and coordination among Lois, Brian, and possibly others in the family. Peter may or may not have known the truth. His low intelligence would make him easy to deceive. Lois could have told him she was pregnant, and he would have believed her without question. He wouldn't notice that Meg was also showing signs of pregnancy. He wouldn't wonder why Lois looked different than she had during her previous pregnancies. He would accept whatever his wife told him and never think to question it. The evidence in plain sight. The theory gained significant support from specific moments in the show that seemed to acknowledge this secret. In the episode Partial Terms of Endearment, there's a shocking moment where Lois explicitly states that Meg gave birth to Stewie. She doesn't hint at it or imply it. She outright says it. In most situations, a statement like this would be absurd, an obvious joke that everyone would laugh off. But what makes this moment different is Meg's reaction, or rather, her lack of reaction. Meg doesn't respond. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't act confused or offended. She just stays silent. This silence is unusual and suspicious. Meg normally reacts when people insult her or make jokes at her expense. She protests, defends herself, or at minimum acknowledges what was said. But when Lois says Meg gave birth to Stewie, Meg says nothing. She lets the statement hang in the air without any response whatsoever. This silence suggests that Lois wasn't joking. She was telling the truth, and Meg knew it. Meg couldn't deny what Lois said, because it was accurate. She couldn't laugh it off because it wasn't funny to her. She couldn't act confused because she understood exactly what Lois meant. So she chose silence, hoping the moment would pass without drawing more attention to the terrible secret they all shared. The theory also explains Meg's age relative to Stewie. While the show doesn't maintain strict continuity about the characters' ages, there are suggestions that Meg is significantly older than the age difference between her and Stewie would suggest if they were normal siblings. If Meg is the actual mother, having given birth at age 13 or 14, she would now be a teenager with a young child, which matches what we see on screen. Why the family treats her so badly? The theory provides a dark explanation for why Meg is treated worse than anyone else in the family. The abuse isn't random or meaningless, it's punishment. Peter, Lois, and the rest of the family blame Meg for the situation she created. She got pregnant at a young age. She forced the family to engage in an elaborate deception. She brought shame upon the household. They resent her for it, and they take out that resentment through constant mockery and abuse. Peter's hatred of Meg becomes especially understandable through this lens. His guilt manifests as cruelty toward the girl he once tried to help, the family's lightning rod. In the episode Seahorse Seashell Party, Meg has a breakthrough moment where she stands up to her family and explains exactly what role she serves in their household. She reveals that she's the family's lightning rod that absorbs all the dysfunction. Her purpose is to take all the abuse, all the mockery, all the cruelty, so that the rest of the family doesn't turn on each other. This revelation takes on deeper meaning when viewed through the lens of the secret mother theory. Meg isn't just a random target for the family's aggression. She's specifically designated as the person who must absorb all the negative energy in the household. This designation may have begun after her pregnancy. The family needed someone to blame for the situation, someone to direct their anger and frustration toward. Meg became that person. By constantly attacking Meg, the family avoids attacking each other. Peter doesn't have to acknowledge his failings as a father. Lois doesn't have to confront her own mistakes. Chris doesn't have to deal with his insecurities. Stewie doesn't have to process his complex feelings about his mother. They can all unite in their shared mockery of Meg, using her as a scapegoat for everything wrong in their lives. Meg accepts this role because she feels she deserves it. She got pregnant young, she disrupted the family, she created this mess. In her mind, accepting the abuse is the price she must pay for her mistake. It's her penance, her punishment, her way of making up for what she did. She sacrifices her own happiness and self-esteem to keep the family together. This explains the end of that same episode. After Meg stands up for herself and tells the family the truth about how they treat her, they start turning on each other instead. Peter and Lois fight. Chris becomes aggressive. The family dynamic falls apart without Meg to serve as their punching bag. Meg realizes that her role, as terrible as it is, serves a purpose. She voluntarily returns to being the lightning rod because she'd rather suffer herself than watch her family destroy itself. Stewie and Meg's relationship. The theory adds complexity to the relationship between Stewie and Meg. Throughout the show, Stewie treats Meg with the same contempt as the rest of the family, often worse. He mocks her appearance, insults her intelligence, and shows no respect for her whatsoever. But if Meg is actually his mother, this cruelty takes on a darker dimension. Stewie doesn't know the truth about his parentage. He believes Lois is his mother and Meg is his sister. His treatment of Meg is based on this false understanding. But on a subconscious level, he might sense something different about their relationship. Children often intuitively understand family dynamics even when they're too young to articulate them. Stewie's genius-level intelligence would make him even more likely to pick up on subtle cues that something isn't quite right about his family structure. The theory suggests that Stewie's cruel treatment of Meg might be a form of displaced anger. If he subconsciously knows or suspects that Meg is his real mother, he might resent her for giving him up, for pretending to be his sister instead of claiming him as her son. His mockery and insults could be his way of punishing her for this abandonment, even though he doesn't consciously understand why he feels such hostility toward her. There are also rare moments where Stewie shows something approaching kindness toward Meg. These moments are fleeting and quickly covered up with more insults, but they exist. Perhaps these brief glimpses of compassion represent the genuine biological bond between mother and child, moments where their true relationship shines through the layers of deception and dysfunction. Brian's guilt and involvement. Brian's role in this theory is particularly interesting because he's often portrayed as the most moral and rational member of the family. If he helped Meg cover up her pregnancy, it represents a significant moral compromise on his part. Brian would have known that hiding the truth was wrong, that it would create long-term problems for everyone involved, especially Meg and Stewie. But he did it anyway, presumably because he cared about Meg and wanted to protect her. Throughout the show, Brian shows a strange combination of attraction to and disdain for Meg. He's made advances toward her on multiple occasions, suggesting inappropriate feelings. He's also been cruel to her, joining in the family's mockery and abuse. This complicated dynamic makes more sense if Brian shares a secret with Meg, a secret that binds them together while simultaneously creating distance between them. Brian's guilt about his role in the cover-up might manifest as hostility toward Meg. He sees her as a reminder of his own moral failure, his willingness to lie and deceive for someone he cared about. He can't be kind to her without remembering what he did, so he's mean to her instead, pushing her away to avoid confronting his own guilt. The theory also explains why Brian is one of the few characters who can understand Stewie perfectly. If Brian was involved in Stewie's birth, if he was there when Meg gave birth and helped arrange the adoption deception, he would have a special connection to Stewie that goes beyond their friendship. He knows Stewie's true origins. He knows the secret of who Stewie really is and where he came from. This knowledge creates a bond between them that neither fully understands or acknowledges. The missing father. One aspect of the theory that raises questions is the identity of Stewie's biological father. According to the theory, Meg got pregnant by an ex-boyfriend who then abandoned her. This person has never been identified in the show, which is suspicious in itself. If Stewie is really Peter and Lois's child, there would be no missing father to identify. But if he's Meg's child, there's a teenage boy somewhere who fathered a child and then disappeared from Meg's life completely. The show has made jokes about Meg having multiple boyfriends who treat her badly. She's been shown dating boys who abuse her, use her, and dump her without remorse. These relationships always end badly for Meg. Perhaps this pattern started with Stewie's father, the first boy who hurt her, abandoned her, and left her to deal with the consequences of their relationship alone. Some versions of the theory speculate about who this father might be. Could it be someone we've seen on the show? Could it be one of Meg's classmates who treats her badly specifically because he knows what happened between them? The show has never explicitly answered these questions, leaving them open to interpretation. Why the secret must be maintained. The theory explains why the family would go to such extreme lengths to hide the truth. If people knew that Meg had given birth at age 13 or 14, there would be serious legal and social consequences. Child Protective Services would become involved. Questions would be asked about how this happened and why no one noticed. The family's reputation in Quahog would be destroyed. Peter might lose his job. The children might be taken away. Beyond the practical consequences, there's the emotional damage to consider. Stewie would be devastated to learn that his mother is actually his sister, that his entire understanding of his family is based on a lie. Meg would be exposed as a teenage mother who gave up her child. The family's dysfunction, already significant, would explode into complete chaos if the truth came out. So the secret must be maintained at all costs. Everyone involved has a reason to keep quiet. Lois doesn't want to admit she's been lying for years. Peter doesn't want to face the truth about his daughter. Brian doesn't want to acknowledge his role in the deception. Meg doesn't want Stewie to know she's his real mother. And Stewie remains blissfully ignorant, never suspecting that his family structure is built on lies. The weight Meg carries. If this theory is true, Meg carries an enormous burden every single day. She's a teenage girl raising her son as her brother, unable to claim him, unable to be his mother in any meaningful way. She watches Lois parent the child Meg gave birth to, watches Lois make decisions about Stewie's life, watches Lois receive the love and affection that should belong to her as his mother. She endures constant abuse from her family, knowing she can't fight back because she believes she deserves it. She accepts the role of lightning rod, absorbing all the dysfunction and cruelty because she thinks this is her punishment for getting pregnant so young. She sacrifices her happiness, her self-esteem, and her future to protect a secret that protects everyone except herself. This theory transforms Meg from a simple punching bag character into a tragic figure carrying an unbearable secret, paying every day for a mistake she made as a child, unable to claim her own son or defend herself against the cruelty of a family that blames her for everything that went wrong. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Chris Griffin and the stolen child theory. Chris Griffin, the boy who doesn't belong. Chris Griffin has always been the odd one out in the Griffin family, though not in the ways most people notice. While his sister Meg gets openly mocked and his brother Stewie schemes for world domination, Chris just exists in the background, seemingly content with his simple life. But there's something fundamentally different about Chris that the show has hinted at repeatedly over the years. He doesn't look like anyone else in his family. His mannerisms are different. His personality doesn't match his supposed parents. And according to a persistent theory backed by multiple references throughout the series, there's a simple explanation for all of this. Chris Griffin isn't actually a Griffin at all. He was stolen from a Dutch family when he was just a baby. The most obvious clue. The first thing anyone notices about Chris is his hair. He has blonde hair, bright and unmistakable. This wouldn't be unusual in most families, but in the Griffin household, it stands out dramatically. Peter has brown hair. Lois has red hair. Meg has brown hair. Stewie has no hair as a baby, but when shown older in future episodes, he also has brown hair. Chris is the only blonde in the entire family, immediate or extended. Hair color is genetic. While it's possible for two parents with darker hair to have a blonde child under certain genetic circumstances, it requires both parents to carry recessive blonde genes. The complete absence of blonde hair in any other Griffin family member makes this extremely unlikely. When looking at Peter's extended family tree, which the show has explored in various episodes, there are no blondes anywhere. The Griffins have dark hair. The Pewterschmidts, Lois's family, have red or brown hair. Chris's blonde hair doesn't come from either side of his supposed family. This physical difference has been noted by characters within the show. People have commented on how Chris doesn't look like his parents. Strangers have questioned whether he's really part of the family. Even family members have made jokes about Chris's parentage. These aren't just throwaway gags. They're consistent references throughout the entire series, suggesting something deeper than simple comedy. The Dutch family connection. The most explicit reference to Chris's true origins comes in the episode Who's Brian Now?, where the show directly states that Chris was kidnapped from a Dutch family as a baby. This isn't presented as speculation or theory. It's stated as fact within the episode's narrative. The joke is delivered casually, as the show often does with its most disturbing revelations, but the implication is clear. Chris Griffin is not Peter and Lois's biological child. He was taken from his real parents, a Dutch couple who never knew what happened to their son. The Netherlands connection explains Chris's blonde hair. The Dutch population has one of the highest percentages of blonde-haired people in the world. A child from a Dutch family would very likely have blonde hair, exactly like Chris does. His physical appearance finally makes sense when you consider his actual genetic heritage rather than his supposed one. But this raises disturbing questions about how Chris ended up with the Griffins. The show presents it as a kidnapping, which means Peter and Lois actively took a baby that wasn't theirs. Did they steal him directly from a hospital? Did they arrange some kind of illegal adoption? Did they find him abandoned and decide to keep him rather than report it to authorities? The show never provides these details, leaving the exact circumstances of Chris's abduction mysterious and unsettling. The adoption papers. In the episode regarding Carter, Peter makes a shocking discovery. While searching through the house, he finds Chris's adoption papers along with one of Lois's guns. This moment is played for laughs, quickly glossed over, and never mentioned again. But if taken seriously, it confirms that Chris was adopted, not born to Peter and Lois as they've always claimed. The presence of adoption papers contradicts the show's occasional flashbacks to Chris's birth. We've seen scenes of Lois pregnant with Chris, giving birth to Chris, and holding baby Chris in the hospital. But if adoption papers exist, all of those scenes must be fabrications, false memories, or lies told to cover up the truth. The show has established that its continuity is loose and inconsistent, which could explain these contradictions. Or perhaps those birth scenes were Peter and Lois's way of rewriting history, creating a false narrative about Chris's origins that they've told so many times they almost believe it themselves. The fact that Peter keeps these adoption papers in the house is particularly strange. Why would he hold on to evidence of Chris's adoption if they're trying to pretend he's their biological child? Perhaps Peter's low intelligence means he doesn't understand the implications of keeping such documents. Perhaps he forgot they existed. Or perhaps part of him wants the truth to come out someday, wants Chris to know where he really came from. A history of questionable parentage. Chris's adoption or kidnapping isn't the only time his parentage has been questioned. Throughout the series, there have been multiple jokes and references suggesting that Chris isn't really Peter's son. In the episode Mission Impossible, it's revealed that Chris was conceived because of a broken condom, with Peter and Lois filing a lawsuit against the condom company. The settlement from this lawsuit paid for the house the family currently lives in. But even this story, if true, only confirms that Lois became pregnant with someone's child. It doesn't prove that Peter was the father. Given the show's hints about Lois's promiscuous past and her relationships with other men, it's possible that Chris was conceived during one of these encounters. Lois might have been unsure who the father was, or she might have known it wasn't Peter, but claimed it was to avoid complications. In Peter's Daughter, Lois admits she smoked and drank heavily when she was pregnant with Chris, attempting to induce a miscarriage. She claims she chickened out halfway through the pregnancy, which is why Chris was born despite her efforts. This disturbing revelation shows that Lois didn't want Chris, at least not initially. But it also raises questions about whether she was ever actually pregnant at all. If Chris was stolen from a Dutch family, Lois was never pregnant with him. Her story about trying to miscarry could be another fabrication, a lie designed to explain away inconsistencies in her supposed pregnancy. Physical differences beyond hair color. Chris doesn't just have different hair from the rest of his family. His entire body type is different. He's tall and overweight like Peter, but his facial features don't match either parent. His head shape is rounder. His nose is different. His eyes are a different color. When you see the Griffin family together, Chris looks like he could be from a completely different gene pool, which, according to this theory, he is. The show has also established that Chris doesn't share many personality traits with his supposed parents or siblings. Peter is loud, brash, and confident despite his stupidity. Lois is manipulative and sharp-tongued. Meg is insecure and desperate for acceptance. Stewie is brilliant and scheming. Chris is gentle, kind, and remarkably unbothered by the chaos around him. He's content with simple pleasures, uncomfortable with conflict, and generally good-natured. This personality difference could be explained by nature rather than nurture. Chris came from different biological parents with different genetic predispositions. The Dutch family he was stolen from might have been kind, gentle people, and Chris inherited these traits from them. Despite being raised in the dysfunctional Griffin household, his true nature shines through. Why steal a baby? The question that haunts this theory is why Peter and Lois would steal a baby in the first place. What circumstances would lead them to kidnap a child from a Dutch family? Several possibilities have been suggested by fans analyzing the show. One possibility is that Peter and Lois couldn't have children of their own, or couldn't have more children after Meg. They desperately wanted a son, but Lois couldn't get pregnant, or couldn't carry a pregnancy to term. Rather than go through legal adoption channels, which are expensive and time-consuming, they decided to simply take a baby when the opportunity presented itself. Another possibility is that something happened to a biological son, and they replaced him with Chris. Perhaps they had a baby boy who died, and in their grief, they stole Chris to fill the void. They convinced themselves that this stolen child was their son, that they were saving him from whatever situation he was in, that they deserved to have a child even if they had to take one from someone else. A darker possibility is that Lois was never pregnant with Chris at all, but Peter believed she was. Perhaps Lois faked a pregnancy to hide an affair or for some other reason. As her supposed due date approached, she panicked, knowing she couldn't produce a baby she'd never been carrying. So she, and possibly Brian, who often helps with family secrets, stole a baby to complete the deception. Peter, in his ignorance, never questioned where the baby came from or why he didn't look like them. The Dutch family's perspective. While the show focuses on the Griffin family, the theory forces us to consider the Dutch family that lost their child. Somewhere in the Netherlands, there are parents who have been missing their son for over a decade. They don't know what happened to him. They don't know if he's alive or dead. They don't know that he's living in Rhode Island with a family that pretends he's theirs. These parents likely reported their son's disappearance to the police. There was probably an investigation. Alerts were issued. The community searched, but they never found him because he was already in America with the Griffins, being raised under a different name, told a different story about who he was and where he came from. The Dutch family probably still thinks about their son every day. They might have other children now, but they never forgot their lost boy. They celebrate his birthday even though he's not there. They keep his room ready in case he ever comes home. They live with the grief and uncertainty of not knowing what happened to their child. Chris has no idea any of this exists. He doesn't know he has real parents in another country who love him and miss him. He doesn't know his real name or his actual birthday. He doesn't know his heritage or his true family history. Everything he believes about himself is based on lies told by the people who stole him. Chris's mental limitations. Chris is frequently portrayed as unintelligent, struggling in school, and lacking common sense. The show often plays this for comedy, with Chris saying or doing something foolish while others react with exasperation. But the theory offers a different explanation for Chris's cognitive difficulties. The trauma of being kidnapped as an infant, even if he has no conscious memory of it, could have affected his brain development. Additionally, being raised in an environment completely different from what his genetics prepared him for might have created developmental challenges. If his biological Dutch parents were intelligent, educated people, Chris's genes might have been coded for a child who would thrive in an intellectual, structured environment. Instead, he's being raised by Peter and Lois Griffin in a chaotic household where education isn't valued and structure doesn't exist. Chris might also be subconsciously aware that he doesn't belong. Children who are adopted often struggle with identity issues, even when they're told the truth about their origins. Chris doesn't even have that honesty. He senses something is wrong, something is different, but he can't articulate what it is. This underlying confusion and uncertainty could manifest as the learning difficulties and social awkwardness we see throughout the show. Peter and Lois's treatment of Chris. While Chris isn't abused the way Meg is, he's also not treated with the love and attention a son should receive. Peter is often dismissive of Chris, showing little interest in his life or development. Lois is cold and distant, fulfilling her basic obligations as a mother, but showing no real warmth or affection. This detachment makes more sense if Chris isn't really their child. Peter might struggle to bond with Chris because on some level he knows Chris isn't his biological son. Every time he looks at Chris, he sees a reminder of whatever circumstances led to Chris joining their family. He sees the lie they've been living, the crime they committed, the child they stole. It's easier to keep emotional distance than to confront these uncomfortable truths. Lois, who may have been more directly involved in Chris's kidnapping, might feel guilt every time she interacts with him. She knows she took this boy from his real parents. She knows she deprived him of his true identity and heritage. Her coldness could be a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the emotional weight of what she's done. The missing extended family. If Chris was stolen from a Dutch family, it explains why he has no relationship with extended family on either side. Peter's family barely acknowledges Chris. Lois's wealthy parents show little interest in him. There are no stories about Chris as a baby, no photos of Lois pregnant with him that can be verified, no relatives who remember his birth. It's as if Chris appeared in the family fully formed with no history before a certain point. The Griffins don't celebrate Chris's birthday with the same enthusiasm they show for other family events. They don't share stories about his baby years. They don't have meaningful traditions tied to his existence. This absence of family history makes sense if Chris doesn't actually have a history with this family, if he was inserted into their lives rather than born into them. Why Chris doesn't question things. Chris has never seriously questioned his place in the family, despite all the evidence that he doesn't belong. His blonde hair doesn't bother him. The adoption papers don't concern him. The jokes about his parentage don't make him investigate. He simply accepts that he's a Griffin and never digs deeper. This acceptance could be attributed to his low intelligence, but it might also be something more psychological. Children who are removed from their biological families at very young ages often struggle with a sense that something isn't right, but they can't identify what it is. Chris might have these feelings, but lack the cognitive tools to understand or express them. He might have dreams or vague memories of his real family, but dismiss them as fantasy. He might feel a persistent sense of not quite belonging, but interpret it as normal teenage insecurity rather than evidence of his stolen origins. The Griffin family has also likely worked hard to suppress any questions Chris might have. When he was younger and asked about his baby pictures or early memories, they probably provided false information or changed the subject. Over time, Chris learned not to ask these questions, accepting the answers he was given without further investigation. The moral weight of the theory. If this theory is true, it transforms the Griffin family's dysfunction from comedy into crime. They aren't just a dysfunctional family making poor choices and treating each other badly. They're actively harboring a stolen child, lying about his identity, and depriving him of his real family. Peter and Lois aren't just bad parents. They're kidnappers who have gotten away with their crime for over a decade. This raises questions about the other secrets the family might be hiding. If they're capable of stealing a child and maintaining that lie for years, what else might they have done? The show has hinted at numerous crimes and moral failures throughout its run, often played for laughs. But viewed through the lens of this theory, these moments take on a darker significance. Chris's future. The theory leaves Chris's future uncertain. Will he ever discover the truth about his origins? Will the Dutch family ever find their lost son? Will someone finally reveal the secret that's been kept from him his entire life? The show has never seriously addressed these questions, preferring to leave Chris in ignorant bliss. But if Chris did learn the truth, it would shatter his entire world. Everything he believed about himself would be revealed as lies. His family wouldn't be his family. His name might not even be his real name. His entire identity would crumble, leaving him to rebuild from nothing. He would have to decide whether to seek out his real family in the Netherlands or stay with the only family he's ever known, even though they built their relationship on kidnapping and deception. The theory transforms Chris from a simple-minded comic relief character into a victim of circumstances beyond his control, a boy stolen from his real family and raised by people who had no right to him, living a life that was never meant to be his, while his real parents somewhere in the Netherlands still wonder what happened to their blonde baby boy who disappeared so many years ago. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Stewie Griffin and the perception theory. Stewie Griffin, the baby who controls reality. Stewie Griffin is the most confusing character in Family Guy. He's a baby, barely 1 year old, yet he speaks with perfect articulation and a sophisticated British accent. He builds time machines, weather control devices, and advanced weaponry that would challenge the world's top scientists. He understands complex physics, speaks multiple languages, and plots elaborate schemes that require genius-level intelligence. But here's the strangest part. Sometimes people can understand him perfectly, having full conversations with him as if he were an adult. Other times, those same people treat him like a normal baby, unable to comprehend his words. This inconsistency has frustrated fans for years, but according to two popular theories, there's a logical explanation. Either the entire show exists inside Stewie's infant mind as he tries to make sense of the world around him, or Stewie isn't really a baby at all, but an adult who has found a way to reverse time itself. The infant perception theory. The first theory proposes that everything viewers see in Family Guy is filtered through Stewie's perception as a baby. He's trying to understand the world from his limited perspective, and what we see on screen is his interpretation of reality rather than reality itself. This theory elegantly explains many of the show's strangest elements, particularly the question of who can understand Stewie and when. In real life, babies don't speak in complete sentences. They don't have British accents. They don't articulate complex thoughts about world domination or matricide. What actually happens is that Stewie makes normal baby sounds, cries, and babbles like any infant would. But in his own mind, he's translating these sounds into sophisticated language. When we hear Stewie speaking eloquently, we're hearing his internal translation of his own baby noises, not what he's actually saying out loud. This explains the inconsistency in who can understand him. Brian, the family dog, can always understand Stewie perfectly because children naturally personify their pets. From Stewie's infant perspective, Brian is a member of the family who can talk just like everyone else. Young children see their pets as friends and companions who understand them. So in Stewie's mind, Brian has the ability to communicate. When we see Brian and Stewie having conversations, we're seeing Stewie's interpretation of his interactions with the family dog. In reality, Stewie is probably making baby noises while Brian sits nearby or occasionally barks, but Stewie's mind translates this into meaningful dialogue. Other characters understand Stewie only sometimes because of how they interact with him. When Lois responds to Stewie, she's responding to his cries and baby sounds like any mother would. She can tell when he's hungry, tired, or upset based on the tone and intensity of his crying. But Stewie interprets her responses as if she understands his actual words. From his perspective, he's having a conversation with his mother, even though from her perspective, she's just soothing a crying baby. Peter and Chris interact with Stewie playfully, making faces and silly sounds the way adults and older siblings do with babies. Stewie interprets this childish behavior as evidence that they're stupid. He thinks Peter and Chris are buffoons because they act goofy around him, not understanding that this is normal behavior when playing with an infant. His limited understanding of social interactions leads him to misinterpret their playfulness as genuine stupidity. Why Lois is the enemy? According to this theory, Stewie's obsession with killing Lois in the earlier seasons stems from typical infant frustration with the primary caregiver. Lois is the one who enforces rules, establishes boundaries, and says no. She puts Stewie down for naps when he wants to play. She makes him eat vegetables when he wants sweets. She changes his diaper when he'd rather be left alone. From Stewie's limited perspective, Lois is a tyrant who controls every aspect of his existence. Babies can't understand that their mothers are acting in their best interests. They only know that this person keeps stopping them from doing what they want. Stewie's elaborate plots to kill Lois are actually his infant mind's way of processing frustration with maternal authority. When he builds weapons aimed at destroying her or creates schemes to eliminate her, he's expressing the same feelings any baby has when their mother disrupts their activities. He's just expressing it in a more complex way inside his own imagination. As the series progresses, Stewie's murderous intent toward Lois fades. He becomes more affectionate with her and occasionally shows genuine love. This change reflects normal child development. As babies grow into toddlers and young children, they begin to understand their relationship with their mother differently. They develop more sophisticated emotional bonds and start to comprehend that rules exist for their benefit. Stewie's softening toward Lois represents his maturing emotional understanding, even though his physical age remains frozen at 1 year old. The elaborate fantasy world. If the show exists in Stewie's mind, it explains the absurd scenarios and impossible situations the family experiences. Babies have no understanding of how the world actually works. Their perception of reality is limited to their immediate experiences, and they fill in the gaps with imagination. Stewie's genius-level intelligence, his advanced inventions, his time travel adventures, and his trips to alternate dimensions are all products of an infant's unlimited imagination, unconstrained by real-world logic. The show's famous cutaway gags take on new meaning through this lens. These random flashbacks and unrelated scenes represent an infant's scattered, unfocused attention span. Babies can't maintain concentration on one thing for long. Their minds jump from thought to thought, from image to image, without logical connection. When characters in the show set up a cutaway gag, we're experiencing Stewie's mind wandering, jumping to different thoughts and memories before returning to the present moment. The violence in the show, which often has no consequences, makes sense as a baby's limited understanding of cause and effect. Stewie sees characters get hurt, but then they're fine in the next scene, because babies don't fully grasp the permanent nature of injury or death. In his mind, people can be hurt one moment and perfectly okay the next, because that's how he experiences minor bumps and falls in his own life. The time machine and other inventions. Stewie's incredible inventions are the most obvious evidence that we're seeing the world through a distorted lens. A 1-year-old baby cannot build a time machine, no matter how intelligent. He can't create weather control devices or mind control rays. He can't construct a teleportation device or a working transporter from Star Trek. These inventions exist only in Stewie's imagination. In reality, Stewie probably plays with ordinary baby toys, building blocks, and household objects. But in his mind, he's transforming these simple items into advanced technology. A cardboard box becomes a time machine. A TV remote becomes a mind control device. Random household items become components in elaborate inventions. Any parent who has watched a child play pretend has seen this kind of imaginative transformation. Stewie's genius inventions are sophisticated versions of normal childhood make-believe. The time travel episodes where Stewie and Brian visit different time periods or alternate realities represent Stewie's attempts to understand concepts of past, present, and future. Babies have no conception of time. They live entirely in the present moment. As they develop, they begin to grasp that things happen before now and will happen later. Stewie's time travel adventures are his infant mind trying to process this confusing concept. The adult de-aging theory. The second major theory about Stewie takes a completely different approach. Instead of suggesting the show exists in his infant mind, this theory proposes that Stewie isn't really a baby at all. He's actually an adult, possibly elderly, who has used his scientific genius to reverse his age and the age of those around him. This theory explains his adult intellect, sophisticated manner of speaking, and genuine scientific capabilities. According to this interpretation, Stewie was once a grown man, possibly middle-aged or older. He had a best friend named Brian, and they shared incredible adventures together. But Brian was a dog, and dogs don't live as long as humans. Stewie watched Brian age, knowing that his best friend would die long before he did. Unable to accept this loss, Stewie dedicated himself to solving the problem of aging and death. Using his genius-level intelligence and scientific knowledge, Stewie eventually created a way to reverse the aging process. But he didn't just want to make himself younger. He wanted to go back to a time when he and Brian were both young, when they had their whole lives ahead of them, when they could continue their adventures indefinitely. So he reversed time for both of them, and possibly for his entire family. The evidence for adult Stewie. Several pieces of evidence support the idea that Stewie is really an adult in a baby's body. His vocabulary and manner of speaking are far too sophisticated for a child of any age, let alone an infant. He uses words and phrases that would challenge most adults. He understands complex scientific concepts that take years of education to grasp. He has knowledge of history, literature, and culture that requires decades of learning. Stewie's relationship with Brian makes more sense if they were once adults together. They interact as equals, as friends who have known each other for a long time. They share inside jokes and references that suggest a shared history. Brian doesn't treat Stewie like a baby. He treats him like an adult friend who happens to be in a baby's body. Their adventures together, particularly in the Road to episodes, show a deep bond that feels more like a long-time friendship than a relationship between a pet and an infant. The show has occasionally shown flash-forwards to Stewie as an adult. In these future scenes, Stewie is sophisticated, successful, and clearly maintains his genius intellect throughout his life. But what if these aren't actually flash-forwards? What if they're flashbacks to who Stewie used to be before he de-aged himself? The adult Stewie we see in these episodes could be the original Stewie, the real Stewie, before he decided to go back to infancy. Why de-age the whole family? If Stewie had the power to reverse aging, why would he de-age his entire family and not just himself and Brian? The theory suggests that Stewie wanted to recreate a specific time period, a moment in his family's history when things were good. Perhaps his family fell apart as everyone grew older. Perhaps his parents died, or his siblings became estranged. Perhaps the family that exists in the show represents an idealized version of a time when everyone was together and relatively happy. By de-aging everyone except Lois, Stewie essentially reset the family to an earlier state. The theory notes that Lois appears to be the same age she always was, suggesting that Stewie either couldn't or wouldn't de-age his mother. His complicated relationship with her, his early desires to kill her, might reflect unresolved issues from his adult life. Perhaps she wronged him in some way when he was older, and his infant state allows him to express anger he couldn't express as an adult. The theory also suggests that not everyone knows what Stewie did. Peter, with his low intelligence, probably has no memory of being older. Chris might have been too young in the original timeline to remember. Meg might suspect something, but can't prove it. Only Stewie himself, and possibly Brian, fully understand what happened and why they're all living in this strange reversed reality. Brian's knowledge and complicity. Brian's role in this theory is crucial because he appears to be the only one who fully understands Stewie and treats him as an equal. If Stewie and Brian were adult friends before the de-aging occurred, Brian would remember their real relationship. He would know that the baby he lives with is actually his longtime companion trapped in an infant's body. This knowledge would explain why Brian never treats Stewie like a child, why he engages in adult conversations with him, why he trusts Stewie's inventions and follows him on dangerous adventures. Brian might have agreed to the de-aging process, or Stewie might have done it without his knowledge. Either way, Brian seems aware that their situation isn't normal. He doesn't question why a baby can build a time machine or speak perfect English. He doesn't wonder why he can understand Stewie when others can't. He accepts the reality they're living in because he knows the truth behind it. The deep friendship between Stewie and Brian makes perfect sense if they've actually known each other for decades rather than just a few years. They have the kind of bond that develops over a lifetime of shared experiences. They know each other's weaknesses, finish each other's sentences, and can communicate almost without words. This isn't the relationship between a baby and a dog. It's the relationship between two old friends who have been through everything together. The Time Machine episodes. The many episodes featuring Stewie's time machine take on new significance with this theory. When Stewie and Brian travel through time, they're not just having adventures. They're revisiting periods that Stewie remembers from his original timeline. He knows about historical events because he lived through them the first time. He understands how things will turn out because he's seen it all before. The alternate reality episodes where Stewie and Brian visit parallel universes might represent Stewie experimenting with different possibilities. Having already reversed time once, he's exploring what other changes he could make. He's seeing how different choices might have led to different outcomes. He's a scientist conducting experiments with reality itself, using his own life and family as test subjects. In the episode Back to the Pilot, Stewie and Brian travel back to the very first episode of Family Guy. This could be interpreted as Stewie returning to the moment when he first reset everything, the point where he began his de-aging experiment. The episode plays with the idea of changing past events and shows the consequences of interfering with established timelines, suggesting that Stewie has deep knowledge of how time and reality work. Why stay a baby? If Stewie has the power to control his age, why does he remain a baby? Why not age himself up to at least toddler or child status, where he would have more physical capabilities and independence? The theory suggests several possible answers. First, Stewie might be stuck. Perhaps the de-aging process can only go one direction, and he can't figure out how to age forward again without losing everything he's gained. He's trapped at 1 year old unless he wants to give up Brian and potentially his entire family. Second, being a baby gives Stewie certain advantages. People don't take babies seriously. They don't suspect babies of being capable of complex thought or dangerous actions. Stewie can work on his inventions and schemes without anyone questioning what he's doing because they all think he's just a baby playing with toys. His infant status is the perfect cover for his adult intelligence and activities. Third, Stewie might be trying to prevent the aging process from resuming at all. If he stays frozen at 1 year old, Brian stays frozen at his current age too. The whole family remains in stasis, never growing older, never moving toward death. Stewie has created a kind of immortality by stopping time completely. Everyone he loves will stay with him forever because none of them can age. The floating timeline. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for either Stewie theory is the show's floating timeline. Family Guy has been on the air for over 20 years, but the characters haven't aged. Stewie has been 1 year old for the entire series. Chris and Meg remain teenagers. Peter and Lois stay the same age. Even Brian, who should have died of old age multiple times by now if he were a normal dog, remains alive and well. In Christmas Guy, Stewie himself comments on this strange phenomenon. He's surprised to be having yet another first Christmas, despite having already celebrated Christmas multiple times throughout the series. This moment of self-awareness suggests that Stewie knows something is wrong with time, that he's aware of the temporal anomaly they're all living in. If he's the one who created this frozen timeline, either through his de-aging technology or through his infinite perception of time, his comment makes perfect sense. The floating timeline isn't just a convenience for the writers. According to these theories, it's a fundamental part of Stewie's reality manipulation. Time doesn't move forward because Stewie won't allow it to. He's controlling the flow of time itself, keeping everyone trapped in an eternal present where no one ages, no one dies, and nothing fundamental ever changes. The British accent mystery. One detail that both theories struggle to explain is Stewie's British accent. Where did it come from? Peter doesn't have a British accent. Lois doesn't have one. No one else in the family speaks with any hint of British influence. Yet Stewie sounds like he grew up in England, complete with sophisticated vocabulary and proper pronunciation. The infant perception theory suggests that Stewie might have heard British voices on television or in movies and incorporated them into his self-image. Babies absorb language from their environment, and if Stewie spent time watching British programs or movies, he might have adopted that accent in his own mind. His internal voice, the way he thinks of himself speaking, uses this accent, even though his actual baby sounds wouldn't reflect it. The de-aging theory offers a different explanation. Perhaps adult Stewie spent significant time in England. Maybe he studied at Oxford or Cambridge. Maybe he lived in the UK for years. When he de-aged himself, he retained his British accent from his adult life. It's one of the few remaining clues to who he really was before the transformation. What others see. Both theories force us to consider what the other characters actually see and hear when they interact with Stewie. If everything is filtered through Stewie's infant perception, then Peter, Lois, Chris, and Meg see a normal baby who cries, babbles, and makes typical infant sounds. They respond to him as parents and siblings respond to babies, completely unaware of the complex thoughts and elaborate schemes happening inside his mind. If Stewie really is a de-aged adult, then others might see a baby who occasionally does or says something strangely mature. They might notice moments where Stewie seems too smart or too capable for his age, but they dismiss these observations because babies can't possibly be genius scientists. Peter, especially with his low intelligence, would never pick up on the truth, even if Stewie spelled it out for him. Brian sees something different because he either shares Stewie's perception or knows the truth about his real identity. He sees the real Stewie, whether that's an infant making sense of the world or an adult trapped in a baby's body. This special vision is what makes their friendship possible. The ultimate question. Both theories about Stewie raise profound questions about reality, perception, and identity. Is Stewie a baby with an overactive imagination who sees the world in a uniquely complex way? Or is he an adult who has literally reversed time to prevent loss and preserve the people he loves? The show will probably never definitively answer this question, preferring to leave it ambiguous and open to interpretation. What we do know is that Stewie Griffin is far more than he appears to be. Whether that complexity exists only in his mind or reflects a genuine scientific miracle, he represents either a child's unlimited imagination or an adult's desperate attempt to escape mortality. He's either the most creative infant ever conceived or the most brilliant scientist who ever lived, one who solved the problem of death itself, but paid for it by trapping himself and everyone he loves in an endless loop of frozen time where nothing ever truly changes and no one can ever truly grow. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Brian Griffin and the CIA experiment theory. Brian Griffin, the dog who was once human. Brian Griffin is the most unusual dog in television history. He walks upright on two legs. He drives a Toyota Prius. He drinks martinis at bars. He writes novels and attends college. He dates human women and has meaningful romantic relationships with them. He engages in complex political discussions and philosophical debates. For most viewers, Brian is simply an anthropomorphic character, a talking dog in a cartoon where logic doesn't apply. But two theories suggest there's a more sinister explanation for Brian's human-like behavior. Either Brian is the victim of a CIA experiment that placed a human brain inside a dog's body, or Brian is actually the creator of everything we see, writing Family Guy itself as a fictionalized version of his own life. The CIA Mind Transfer Program. The first theory connects Family Guy to its sister show, American Dad, which was also created by Seth MacFarlane. Both shows exist in the same universe, with occasional crossovers and references that confirm they share a reality. This connection becomes crucial when examining the character of Klaus from American Dad, because Klaus provides undeniable proof that the CIA has developed technology to transfer human consciousness into animal bodies. Klaus Heisler was once a German Olympic ski jumper, a talented athlete with his whole life ahead of him. The CIA kidnapped him and, using advanced technology, extracted his brain or consciousness and placed it into the body of a goldfish. Klaus now lives in a fishbowl in the Smith family's house, fully aware of his human past, but trapped in an aquatic body. He retains his German accent, his human memories, his personality, and his intelligence. He's miserable, angry, and frustrated by his situation, but he's powerless to change it. The CIA's willingness to perform this grotesque experiment on Klaus proves they possess the technology for mind transfer and have no ethical boundaries preventing them from using it. If they did it to Klaus, turning a human into a fish, they could easily have done similar experiments on other subjects. The technology exists. The agency has demonstrated they'll use it. The question isn't whether they could create more human-animal hybrids. The question is how many they've created and where those experiments are now. Brian as a CIA experiment. Brian Griffin shows all the signs of being another victim of the CIA's mind transfer program. He's not a naturally evolved talking dog or a magical creature. He's a human consciousness trapped inside a canine body, just like Klaus is a human consciousness trapped inside a fish. This explains every unusual aspect of Brian's character that has puzzled viewers for years. Brian's intelligence is far beyond what any dog, no matter how smart, could possess. He understands complex literature, writes novels and screenplays, engages in political activism, and grasps philosophical concepts that challenge most humans. This isn't enhanced canine intelligence. This is human intelligence operating within a dog's brain. The human mind that was transferred into Brian's body brought all its knowledge, memories, and cognitive abilities with it. Brian's ability to speak perfect English with no trace of a dog's physical limitations makes sense if he has a human brain controlling a dog's vocal cords. He doesn't struggle with pronunciation or vocabulary the way a dog learning to speak might. He speaks naturally because the brain sending signals to his mouth is human. Even if the mouth itself is canine, he's essentially a human using a dog's body as a biological puppet. Why Brian can do everything humans do. The theory explains Brian's remarkable abilities that should be impossible for a dog. He drives a car, operating pedals and a steering wheel, with paws that shouldn't have the dexterity for such tasks. But if a human brain is controlling those paws, sending signals based on years of human driving experience, the physical limitations matter less. Brian isn't learning to drive as a dog would. He already knows how to drive from his time as a human. Brian writes extensively throughout the series. He's working on novels, essays, and screenplays. He types on keyboards, holds pens, and operates computers. Dogs don't have the fine motor control for writing, but Brian manages it because he's not really a dog trying to learn human skills. He's a human trapped in a dog's body, still able to access the knowledge and abilities he possessed before the transfer. Most tellingly, Brian dates human women and forms romantic relationships with them. He's attracted to human females, not to other dogs. He's had relationships with Jillian, a human woman. He's been in love with Lois, his owner's wife. He's kissed and been intimate with numerous human women throughout the series. This attraction makes no sense for a dog, even a smart one, but it makes perfect sense for a human consciousness inside a dog's body. Brian is attracted to human women because he used to be a human man. Brian's origins and family. The theory provides a dark reinterpretation of Brian's backstory. The show has revealed that Brian came from a litter of normal puppies. His mother was a regular dog. His father was a regular dog. All his siblings behaved like typical dogs. Brian was the only one who acted human, the only one who could talk, the only one who stood upright and displayed human characteristics. This unusual situation makes sense if Brian wasn't born with a human consciousness, but received it later. Perhaps the CIA found a litter of puppies and selected Brian for their experiment. He would have been born as a normal puppy. But at some point early in his life, the CIA performed the transfer procedure. They took a human subject, perhaps a prisoner, a homeless person, or someone who wouldn't be missed, and transferred that person's consciousness into the puppy's body. Brian's human consciousness awakened inside a dog's body, surrounded by his dog mother and dog siblings, who couldn't understand what had happened to him. He was alone with his human thoughts, trapped in a form that couldn't express them. As he grew, he learned to control his canine body in human ways, teaching himself to walk upright, to speak, to use his paws like hands. His dog family probably thought he was defective or crazy, unable to understand that their son and brother had been stolen and replaced with a human mind. Why the CIA would do this? The theory raises the question of why the CIA would put a human brain in a dog's body. What purpose does this serve? With Klaus, the motive seems to be cruelty or punishment, a way to neutralize a person by trapping them in a helpless form. But Brian's situation appears different. He has freedom of movement, the ability to function in society, and a relatively comfortable life with the Griffin family. One possibility is that Brian is a spy. A dog can go places humans can't. A dog is ignored and underestimated. No one suspects a dog of gathering intelligence or conducting surveillance. Brian could have been designed as the perfect covert operative, a human agent in a form that attracts no suspicion. Perhaps his mission involves monitoring the Griffin family or someone in Quahog. Perhaps he's been collecting information for years, sending reports back to the CIA without anyone realizing what he's doing. Another possibility is that Brian is a failed or abandoned experiment. Maybe the CIA was testing the limits of their mind transfer technology, seeing if they could create functional human-animal hybrids. Brian might have been one of many test subjects, but something went wrong with the program. Maybe the technology proved unreliable or too expensive. Maybe the ethical concerns became too severe even for the CIA. The project was shut down and Brian was released or escaped, ending up with Peter Griffin, who took him in as a stray. The show has established that Peter found Brian as a stray outside a liquor store. This origin story fits with the theory. Brian wasn't born into a loving home. He was wandering the streets, possibly escaped from a CIA facility, trying to survive while trapped in a dog's body. Peter, in his characteristic ignorance, saw a dog and decided to keep it, never questioning why this particular dog could talk and act like a human. The connection to other talking animals. The CIA experiment theory extends beyond just Brian. Family Guy features several other animals with human characteristics. Most notably, there's Ernie the giant chicken, who engages in elaborate, violent battles with Peter. Ernie walks upright, fights with martial arts techniques, and displays human-level intelligence and planning. He could be another CIA experiment, perhaps one that went even more wrong than Brian. The theory suggests that all the talking, human-acting animals in Family Guy might be products of CIA experimentation. The agency has been conducting these transfers for years, creating dozens or hundreds of human-animal hybrids. Some, like Brian, learned to function in society. Others, like Ernie, became unstable and dangerous. They're scattered throughout the world, living among normal humans and animals, unable to reveal their true nature because no one would believe them. This would explain why Brian never seems shocked by other animals displaying human characteristics. He's not surprised when he meets other talking animals because he knows what they really are. They're fellow victims of the same program that created him. They share a terrible bond, a secret they can't discuss openly because it would expose the truth about all of them. Brian's misery and self-destruction. Understanding Brian as a human trapped in a dog's body reframes his entire character. Brian is frequently portrayed as miserable, alcoholic, narcissistic, and self-destructive. He drinks heavily, often to the point of passing out. He's attempted suicide multiple times. He's deeply insecure despite his outward confidence. He struggles with relationships and can't seem to find lasting happiness. All of this makes perfect sense for someone experiencing what Brian experiences. Imagine being a human with all your memories, desires, and ambitions, suddenly trapped in a dog's body. You can think and feel as a human, but you're limited by a canine form. You're attracted to human women, but they see you as a dog. You want to be taken seriously as a writer and intellectual, but people treat you as a pet. You have the mind of a man, but the body and social status of an animal. This constant disconnect between Brian's internal reality and external circumstances would drive anyone to alcoholism and depression. He drinks to forget what he is, to numb the pain of his situation. He writes obsessively, trying to prove his human worth through literature and art. He pursues human women desperately, seeking validation that he's still somehow human despite his body. He's narcissistic because he needs constant reinforcement that he matters, that he's more than just a dog. Brian's relationship with Stewie takes on new meaning through this lens. Stewie is one of the few characters who consistently treats Brian as a complete equal. Stewie doesn't see Brian as a pet or as lesser because he's a dog. They're best friends, partners in adventures, intellectual equals. For Brian, this friendship is precious because it's one of the only relationships where he's fully accepted as the person he truly is inside, regardless of his external form. The writer theory. Brian creates his own reality. The second major theory about Brian takes a completely different approach. Instead of being a victim of CIA experimentation, this theory suggests Brian is actually in control of everything. He's writing Family Guy itself, creating the entire show as a fictionalized version of his own life and family. This theory explains why Brian is always present, why he breaks the fourth wall, and why he's consistently portrayed as the voice of reason, even when his actions contradict that image. Throughout the series, Brian is established as a writer. He's constantly working on novels, essays, and screenplays. He's published books and had some minor success in the literary world. He takes his writing seriously, perhaps more seriously than anything else in his life. Writing is his identity, his passion, his way of making sense of the world. But what if his writing goes beyond simple novels and screenplays? What if Brian is literally writing the reality we see on screen? The theory proposes that Family Guy is Brian's latest work, a semi-autobiographical story based on his real life with a real family he lives with. The Griffins exist, but they're not quite as we see them on screen. Brian has exaggerated their characteristics, made them more extreme and ridiculous to create better entertainment. The real Peter might be somewhat foolish, but Brian has made him an absolute idiot in his story. The real Lois might be occasionally vain, but Brian has emphasized this trait to make her more interesting as a character. Why Brian would write this? If Brian is writing Family Guy, it explains several aspects of the show that have puzzled fans. First, it explains why Brian himself is always portrayed sympathetically, even when he does terrible things. Writers often make themselves the heroes or the voice of reason in their own stories. Brian can't help but paint himself as the intelligent moral center of the family because that's how he sees himself. Even when he's drinking too much, dating inappropriately, or behaving badly, the narrative finds ways to excuse or explain his behavior. Second, It explains why Brian appears in virtually every episode. When episodes focus on just one or two family members, Brian is almost always included. The Road to episodes pair Brian and Stewie exclusively, leaving the rest of the family behind. If Brian is writing these stories, of course he writes himself into every adventure. He's the author inserting himself into his own narrative because he's the one creating it. Third, it explains the show's frequent fourth wall breaking. Brian and Stewie often reference that they're in a television show, comment on the animation quality, or directly address the audience. If Brian is writing Family Guy within the Family Guy universe, these moments make perfect sense. The characters are aware they're in a story because Brian, the writer, has made them aware. It's his way of being clever and meta within his own creation. The exaggeration explanation. The theory suggests that Brian started writing relatively realistic stories based on his life with the Griffins, but these stories didn't sell. Publishers rejected them as too boring or mundane. Readers weren't interested in a normal family with everyday problems. So, Brian began exaggerating. He made Peter more stupid, made Lois more sexually adventurous, made Meg more pathetic, made Chris more clueless, and made Stewie an evil genius baby. These exaggerations got attention. The stories became more outlandish and therefore more marketable. Brian kept pushing further, adding time travel, alternate dimensions, celebrity encounters, and increasingly absurd scenarios. The real Griffin family probably lives a normal suburban life, but in Brian's fictionalized version, they're constantly embroiled in impossible adventures. This explains the show's increasing absurdity over the years. As Brian has continued writing, he's had to keep topping himself, making each story more extreme than the last to maintain interest. The early seasons were relatively grounded because Brian was still somewhat connected to reality. The later seasons are completely unhinged because Brian has lost sight of the real family and is writing pure fantasy. Brian's self-insert problems. Like many writers who base fiction on their own lives, Brian has created problems for himself by making his real family recognizable in his work. The real Griffins probably know about Brian's writing and have figured out that they're the inspiration for his characters. This has likely caused tension in their real relationship. Peter probably resents being portrayed as an idiot. Lois probably objects to being written as promiscuous. Meg definitely wouldn't appreciate being made the family punching bag. But Brian can't stop writing about them because they're his best material. He lives with them every day. He observes their quirks, their arguments, their daily routines. They're the source for everything he writes. Without the Griffins, Brian would have nothing to write about. So he continues using them as characters, knowing it damages his real relationships, but unable to give up the creative inspiration they provide. The show's inconsistent characterization makes sense through this lens. Different episodes portray the family members with wildly different personalities and traits because Brian is experimenting with how to write them. He's trying different approaches, seeing what works, revising his characterizations based on feedback from publishers or readers. The characters aren't consistent because they're works in progress, constantly being rewritten by an author who hasn't fully figured them out yet. Why the show continues despite poor quality. Critics often point out that Family Guy's quality has declined significantly over the years. Later seasons are criticized for being lazy, offensive, and poorly written compared to the earlier episodes. But if Brian is the in-universe writer of Family Guy, this decline makes perfect sense. Brian is a mediocre writer who had a few good ideas early on, but has been coasting ever since. The show has explicitly established that Brian is not actually a talented writer. His novel, Faster Than the Speed of Love, was universally panned. His screenplays get rejected. His essays are pretentious and self-important. Brian thinks he's a brilliant author, but the evidence consistently shows he's delusional about his own abilities. If this hack writer is responsible for creating Family Guy, It's no wonder the show has become increasingly terrible. Brian continues producing Family Guy content because he has nothing else. His other writing projects have failed. This is his only success, his only source of income and identity. He keeps turning out episodes even though his heart isn't in it anymore, even though he's clearly run out of good ideas, because he can't afford to stop. He's trapped by his own creation, forced to keep producing a show he's long since stopped caring about, the meta-narrative. If Brian is writing Family Guy within Family Guy, it creates a complex meta-narrative where we're watching a fictionalized version of a fiction writer's life as he writes fiction about his own life. The show becomes layers of reality and fiction stacked on top of each other, with Brian at the center, creating and being created simultaneously. This would explain some of the show's strangest elements, like episodes where the characters explicitly discuss being on a television show or interact with the show's production staff. In Inside Family Guy, the episode presents a behind-the-scenes look at how the show is made, with actors playing the family members. If Brian wrote that episode, he's imagining what it would be like if his stories were turned into a television show, creating fiction about fiction about fiction. It would also explain crossover episodes with other shows, or appearances by real celebrities playing themselves. These aren't actually happening in Brian's real life. They're flights of fancy, what-if scenarios where Brian imagines his family meeting famous people or interacting with characters from other shows. He's writing fan fiction about his own life, mixing real elements with fantasy to create something more entertaining than reality. The two theories connect. Interestingly, both major theories about Brian share some common elements. Whether he's a human trapped in a dog's body or a writer creating fictionalized versions of his life, Brian is fundamentally caught between two identities. He's stuck in a form or role that doesn't match his self-perception. He's trying to be something he's not, or trying to express a truth about himself that others can't or won't see. Both theories explain why Brian drinks heavily, why he's so insecure despite his outward confidence, why he needs constant validation, and why his relationships always fail. He's living a fundamental lie, either about his physical nature or about his creative work. He presents himself to the world as one thing, while knowing deep down that he's something else entirely. Both theories also position Brian as the character with the most awareness of the show's true nature. If he's a CIA experiment, he understands the hidden reality of talking animals and government conspiracies that others don't see. If he's the writer, he understands that the events of the show aren't entirely real because he's the one creating them. Either way, Brian has knowledge and perspective that other characters lack. The truth we'll never know. Family Guy will likely never confirm either theory about Brian. The show benefits from ambiguity, from leaving questions unanswered and allowing multiple interpretations. Is Brian a victim of government experimentation? Another Klaus suffering in a different form? Is he a mediocre writer creating increasingly absurd fiction based on his real family? Is he somehow both or neither? What we do know is that Brian Griffin is far more than a simple talking dog character. Whether through CIA mind transfer technology or through the power of his own writing, Brian has created a reality where he can function as both human and animal, character and creator, victim and author. He's trapped in contradictions, living a life that doesn't quite make sense, always drinking to numb the confusion of existing in a form or role that doesn't fit who he believes himself to be. And in that confusion, that fundamental disconnection between internal reality and external circumstances, Brian might be the most human character in Family Guy, regardless of what body he inhabits or what story he's writing. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Glenn Quagmire and the immortal incubus theory. Glenn Quagmire, the demon who walks among us. Glenn Quagmire is known for one thing above all else, his insatiable sexual appetite. He's slept with hundreds, possibly thousands of women throughout his life. His catchphrase, "giggity," has become synonymous with sexual excitement. He lives next door to the Griffins in a house that serves as his personal den of debauchery, filled with equipment, toys, and devices designed for every conceivable sexual activity. On the surface, Quagmire appears to be nothing more than a perverted middle-aged man with no self-control. But a closer examination of his character reveals something far more sinister. Glenn Quagmire might not be human at all. Evidence throughout the series suggests he's actually an immortal incubus, a demonic entity that feeds on sexual energy and has been walking the earth for centuries. The age that doesn't match. The first major clue to Quagmire's true nature is his age. Throughout the series, Quagmire has claimed to be over 60 years old. In some episodes, he references being 61. In others, he mentions being even older. These aren't vague references. Quagmire specifically states his age on multiple occasions, making it clear that he's significantly older than he appears. But Quagmire doesn't look 60. He doesn't move like someone in their 60s. He doesn't have the physical limitations that come with aging. His face is relatively unlined. His body is muscular and fit. He performs sexual acts that would exhaust men half his age. He maintains an energy level and physical stamina that should be impossible for someone his age, especially given his lifestyle of constant sexual activity and poor health choices. Most people in their 60s show obvious signs of aging. Their hair grays or falls out. Their skin wrinkles. They slow down. They develop health problems. They can't maintain the same level of physical activity they had in their youth. But Quagmire shows none of these signs. He looks like he's in his late 30s or early 40s at most. This disconnect between his stated age and his physical appearance suggests something supernatural is preserving his youth. The theory proposes that Quagmire doesn't age normally because he's not mortal. As an immortal entity, possibly an incubus or demon, he doesn't follow human aging patterns. He's been alive for far longer than 60 years. That number might only represent how long he's been living in Quahog under his current identity. His true age could be measured in centuries or even millennia. He's seen empires rise and fall. He's lived through historical events that are ancient history to everyone around him. But he can't reveal this truth, so he claims to be 60, old enough to explain some of his references to past decades, but young enough not to raise too many questions. What is an incubus? To understand this theory fully, it's important to know what an incubus actually is. In mythology and folklore across many cultures, an incubus is a male demon that feeds on sexual energy. These entities take on attractive human forms and seduce women, draining their life force through sexual encounters. Incubi are immortal, supernaturally attractive, and possessed of an endless sexual appetite. They cannot be killed by conventional means and are immune to diseases that affect mortals. The incubus legend exists in various forms across different cultures. In medieval Europe, incubi were blamed for sleep paralysis and unexplained pregnancies. In other traditions, they're described as vampiric entities that drain vitality through sexual contact. What all versions share is the concept of a supernatural male entity that exists primarily to engage in sexual activity with human women, feeding on the energy generated by these encounters. Quagmire fits this description perfectly. His entire existence revolves around sex. He's not interested in meaningful relationships, emotional connections, or long-term partnerships. He wants conquest, variety, and endless new partners. He moves from woman to woman without forming attachments, taking what he needs from each encounter before moving to the next. This isn't human behavior, even for someone with a high sex drive. This is predatory behavior driven by supernatural needs, the supernatural attraction. One of the most puzzling aspects of Quagmire's character is his incredible success with women. Despite being a middle-aged airline pilot with a disturbing personality and obvious red flags, Quagmire has slept with an absurd number of women. He brings home different women constantly. He has success at bars, clubs, airports, and seemingly everywhere he goes. Women who should immediately recognize him as dangerous or creepy still end up in his bed. This success rate is impossible for a normal human, especially given Quagmire's behavior. He's overtly sexual to the point of being offensive. He makes crude comments. He's clearly only interested in sex. He has a reputation in Quahog as a pervert. Any reasonable woman would avoid him. Yet women continue falling for his advances, suggesting something beyond normal human attraction is at work. The theory proposes that Quagmire possesses a supernatural glamour, a form of demonic magic that makes him irresistible to his targets. This glamour doesn't change his physical appearance, but affects how women perceive him. When Quagmire focuses his attention on a woman, the glamour makes her see him as attractive, trustworthy, and desirable, overriding her better judgment and natural caution. She feels drawn to him against her own rational thoughts, compelled by supernatural forces she doesn't understand. This would explain why Quagmire's success doesn't match his actual attractiveness or personality. The women aren't responding to who he really is. They're responding to the demonic influence he projects, the incubus glamour that clouds their judgment and makes them vulnerable to his advances. Once the encounter is over and the glamour fades, the women often seem confused about why they were attracted to him in the first place. But by then, it's too late. Immunity to disease. One of the most telling pieces of evidence for Quagmire's supernatural nature is his relationship with disease. Quagmire has explicitly stated that he carries multiple sexually transmitted diseases. Given his thousands of sexual partners and complete disregard for protection, this isn't surprising. What is surprising is that these diseases don't seem to affect him at all. In the episode Joe's Revenge, Peter and Joe poke Quagmire with needles infected with various diseases as revenge for something he's done. Quagmire laughs off the attack, stating that he's already a carrier of everything they could possibly infect him with. He lists diseases by name, casually mentioning that he has them all. But he shows no symptoms. He's not sick. He's not dying. He's not even slowed down. The diseases exist in his body, but they can't harm him. This immunity is impossible for a human. STDs cause serious health problems. They create symptoms, pain, and complications. Some are fatal if left untreated. Having multiple STDs simultaneously should leave someone severely ill, possibly hospitalized or dead. But Quagmire functions perfectly well, maintaining his active lifestyle and endless sexual encounters without any health consequences. The theory explains this immunity through Quagmire's immortal nature. Diseases affect mortals because they damage mortal bodies. But an immortal being doesn't have a mortal body that can be permanently damaged. Quagmire can carry diseases without being harmed by them because his body isn't truly biological in the human sense. He's a demon inhabiting a physical form, and that form can't be destroyed by mere viruses or bacteria. More disturbingly, Quagmire weaponizes his diseases in that same episode. He deliberately uses his infected status to harm others, suggesting he has full control over his condition. He's not a victim of disease, but a carrier who can choose when and how to spread what he has. This level of control over infectious agents is another sign of supernatural influence over biological processes. The dark side of immortality. If Quagmire is truly immortal, it explains many of his darker personality traits. He's lived for centuries or longer, watching generations of humans be born, live, and die. He's seen the same patterns repeat endlessly. He's had thousands of sexual partners, and none of them meant anything because they all eventually died while he continued on. This endless existence has stripped away his humanity, leaving only the base urges and predatory instincts of his demonic nature. Quagmire shows no real empathy or emotional connection to others. He views women as objects for his pleasure, not as people with their own thoughts and feelings. He's willing to engage in morally questionable or outright illegal activities to satisfy his desires. He's revealed moments of extreme darkness that go beyond normal human depravity. This complete lack of moral compass makes sense for an immortal demon. Human morality developed from our understanding that actions have consequences and that we're all part of a shared community. But Quagmire isn't part of human community. He's separate from it, above it, preying on it. He's had centuries to lose any moral sense he might have once possessed, and now only his demonic appetites remain. The show has hinted at Quagmire's capacity for extreme violence. He murdered his sister's abusive boyfriend, and the act seemed easy for him, suggesting it wasn't his first kill. An immortal being would have committed murder countless times over centuries of existence. Human life has no real value to something that has watched millions of humans live and die. Quagmire could have a body count in the hundreds or thousands, with victims scattered across centuries and continents, none of whom could be connected to him because he simply outlives any investigation, his father's transformation. An interesting wrinkle in this theory involves Quagmire's father, Dan Quagmire, who later transitions and becomes Ida. Dan served in the Vietnam War and later underwent gender reassignment surgery. The show portrays this as a normal human transition, but the theory suggests something more supernatural might be at work. If Quagmire is an immortal demon, what does that make his father? The most likely explanation is that Dan, now Ida, is also a supernatural entity, possibly Quagmire's literal demonic parent. The gender transition might not be what it appears. It could be a demon changing forms, adopting new identities, or transforming in ways that humans can't fully comprehend. Demons in folklore are often described as shapeshifters, able to take different forms as needed. This would explain some odd aspects of their relationship. Quagmire seems disturbed by his father's transition, but not in the way a normal human son might be. His reaction seems more complicated, possibly reflecting his understanding of what the transformation really represents. He knows his father isn't simply a human transitioning genders, but a supernatural entity changing forms, and this bothers him in ways he can't fully express to his human friends. The fact that Quagmire's father also served in Vietnam decades ago, but doesn't appear significantly old, also supports the immortality theory. Like Quagmire, Dan, now Ida, doesn't age normally. Both father and son maintain younger appearances than their timelines would suggest because neither is actually human. The connection to Stan Smith. The theory extends beyond just Quagmire to suggest a possible familial connection with Stan Smith, the protagonist of American Dad. The evidence for this connection is primarily visual and vocal. Stan and Quagmire share remarkably similar physical features, most notably their pronounced chins. Both have similar hairstyles, similar skin tones, and similar facial structures. They could easily pass as brothers or close relatives based on appearance alone. Adding to this connection is the fact that both characters are voiced by Seth MacFarlane using very similar voices. While MacFarlane voices multiple characters across his shows, he typically gives them distinct vocal characteristics. But Stan and Quagmire sound remarkably similar, suggesting an intentional connection between the characters. The show has made jokes about the Stan and Joe resemblance, with characters mistaking Joe Swanson for Stan Smith. But fans have noted that Quagmire actually looks more like Stan than Joe does. Joe and Stan both have square jaws and similar builds, but Quagmire's facial features match Stan's almost perfectly. The joke about Joe might be misdirection, hiding the real connection between Quagmire and Stan. If Quagmire is an immortal supernatural entity, Stan could be related to him in several ways. Stan might be Quagmire's descendant, carrying demon blood that's been diluted over generations, but still present. Stan's own bizarre characteristics, his extreme personality, his ability to survive impossible situations, might all be explained by demonic ancestry. He's part human, part whatever Quagmire is, and this mixed heritage gives him abilities beyond normal humans while still keeping him mostly within human parameters. Alternatively, Stan and Quagmire could be the same entity at different points in time or in different identities. Immortal beings often create new identities when their current one has aged beyond believability. Quagmire might eventually abandon his Glenn Quagmire identity and become Stan Smith, moving to Langley Falls and starting a new life with a new career. Or Stan could be who Quagmire was before he became Quagmire, with the CIA work representing an earlier phase of his endless existence. Why remain in Quahog? If Quagmire is truly immortal and has lived for centuries, why does he stay in Quahog? Why remain in a small Rhode Island town as an airline pilot when he could be anywhere in the world doing anything? The theory suggests that Quahog provides exactly what Quagmire needs: a steady supply of women, a community that doesn't ask too many questions, and friends who are too stupid or self-absorbed to notice his supernatural nature. Peter, his closest neighbor and friend, is far too unintelligent to recognize that Quagmire never ages, never gets sick, and displays impossible abilities. Joe is focused on his own problems and his police work. Cleveland is too good-natured to suspect evil in his friend. Quagmire has surrounded himself with people who won't notice or won't care about the evidence of his true nature. Additionally, being an airline pilot gives Quagmire the perfect cover for his immortal lifestyle. He can travel anywhere in the world, accessing fresh hunting grounds for his sexual predation. He can disappear for days at a time without raising suspicion. If questions arise about his past or his age, he can claim he was out of the country for extended periods. The job provides both mobility and plausible deniability. Quahog itself might hold some significance for Quagmire's demonic nature. The town experiences an unusual amount of supernatural and paranormal activity. It's been visited by God and death themselves. Time travel, alternate dimensions, and impossible events occur regularly. Perhaps Quahog sits on some kind of supernatural convergence point, a place where the barrier between the mortal world and other realms is thin. Quagmire might be drawn to this location the way demons are drawn to places of power, the future that never comes. The show has occasionally depicted future timelines where the characters are older. In these futures, most characters show obvious signs of aging. Peter is elderly. Lois is elderly. Even Brian, despite being a dog, shows age. But Quagmire in these future scenes doesn't appear dramatically different from his current appearance. He might have some gray hair or minor wrinkles, but he's essentially the same Quagmire, still sexually active, still energetic, still fundamentally unchanged. This resistance to aging over decades or generations supports the immortality theory. If Quagmire were human, he should be significantly older in these future timelines. He should be in his 80s or 90s, probably deceased or severely limited by age. Instead, he's still Quagmire, still pursuing women, still living the same life he's always lived. Time passes for everyone around him, but he remains essentially constant. The theory suggests that Quagmire will still be in Quahog, still living in his house, still being Quagmire long after everyone he currently knows has died. He'll watch Peter die. He'll watch Lois die. He'll see their children grow old and die. And then he'll create new friendships with new neighbors, repeat the same patterns, tell the same jokes, live the same existence he's been living for centuries, because that's what immortal beings do. They continue unchanging while the mortal world cycles around them. The evidence in his home. Quagmire's house contains numerous clues to his supernatural nature for those who know where to look. He has an extensive collection of sexual equipment and devices, some of which appear ancient or from different historical periods. An immortal being would accumulate such a collection over centuries, gathering items from different eras and cultures. Some of the things in Quagmire's house might be hundreds of years old, antiques from medieval Europe or ancient Rome that he's kept as he's moved through different identities and locations. He also has photographs and memorabilia from various time periods, sometimes showing him in settings that don't match his supposed age. The show plays these as jokes, but they could be genuine evidence of his extended existence. That photo of Quagmire at Woodstock, he was actually there. That reference to something from the 1920s, he lived through it. His casual mentions of historical events aren't based on reading about them, but on personal experience of living through them. Quagmire's house also contains religious symbols and items from various cultures and time periods, suggesting he studied different religions and spiritual traditions. An immortal demon would be familiar with humanity's various attempts to understand and combat supernatural evil. He might keep these items as trophies, as reminders of failed attempts to stop him, or simply as interesting artifacts from his long existence. Why he hates Brian. Quagmire's intense hatred of Brian Griffin takes on new significance through this theory. In the episode Jerome is the New Black, Quagmire delivers a lengthy speech explaining all the reasons he despises Brian. He calls out Brian's hypocrisy, his pretensions, his treatment of women, and his general character flaws. On the surface, this seems like simple dislike between two characters with incompatible personalities. But if Quagmire is a supernatural entity, his hatred of Brian might run deeper. If Brian is also supernatural, as the CIA experiment theory suggests, Quagmire might recognize Brian as another non-human entity. Perhaps demons and CIA experiments have some kind of supernatural awareness of each other. Perhaps Quagmire sees Brian as competition or as a threat to his cover. If Brian's true nature were exposed, it might lead to investigations that could expose Quagmire as well. Alternatively, Quagmire's hatred might stem from jealousy or territorial instincts. Brian has inserted himself into the Griffin family, becoming Peter's best friend and a permanent resident in their home. Quagmire, as a supernatural predator, might resent Brian's position and access. He might see Brian as an intruder on what Quagmire considers his hunting ground. The feud between them isn't just personality conflict, but supernatural entities competing for territory and influence. The incubus's eternal curse. If Quagmire is truly an incubus, his existence is ultimately tragic, despite his superficial pleasure-seeking. Incubi in mythology are often portrayed as cursed entities forced to feed on sexual energy without ever being satisfied. They can't form real emotional connections. They can't experience love or genuine intimacy. They're trapped in an endless cycle of seduction and feeding, unable to break free from their demonic nature. Quagmire's famous promiscuity might not be a choice, but a compulsion. He needs sexual energy the way humans need food. He's not choosing to sleep with hundreds of women because he wants to, but because he has to. His body, his demonic form, requires this energy to survive. Without it, he would weaken and possibly die, or be pulled back to whatever hellish realm spawned him. This reframes Quagmire's character from a simple sex addict to a tragic figure cursed with immortality and an insatiable hunger he can never truly satisfy. Each conquest brings momentary relief, but no lasting fulfillment. He's been seeking satisfaction for centuries, moving from woman to woman, hoping each encounter will finally be enough. But it never is. It never will be. He's trapped in his own personal hell, an eternal loop of desire and disappointment, living forever but never truly alive. The theory transforms Glenn Quagmire from a comedic pervert into something ancient and terrible, a demonic entity that has walked among humans for generations, feeding on them, using them, discarding them, and moving on to the next victim in an endless cycle that will continue long after everyone currently living in Quahog has turned to dust. His catchphrase, "Giggity," becomes not a silly expression of joy, but the gleeful cry of a predator who has found fresh prey and knows exactly what he'll do to them. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Joe Swanson and the Tick Theory. Joe Swanson, the secret superhero in a wheelchair. Joe Swanson is introduced to Family Guy as Peter Griffin's new neighbor, a police officer who has been paralyzed from the waist down after an accident on the job. He lives with his wife Bonnie and eventually their children, maintaining a brave face despite his disability. Joe is portrayed as remarkably capable despite being confined to a wheelchair, displaying fighting abilities and physical strength that seem impossible for someone in his condition. But according to a compelling fan theory, there's a reason Joe possesses these superhuman capabilities. Joe Swanson isn't just a paralyzed police officer. He's actually the Tick, a nearly indestructible superhero who once protected the city in a bright blue costume. And he might still be using that superhero identity in secret. The undeniable connection. The evidence for this theory begins with the most obvious connection between Joe Swanson and the Tick. They're both voiced by Patrick Warburton. Warburton provided the voice for the Tick in the live-action television series that aired on Fox from 2001 to 2002. This wasn't just any voice acting role. Warburton's distinctive deep voice became synonymous with the Tick character, defining how an entire generation understood this superhero. That same unmistakable voice is used for Joe Swanson in Family Guy. When Joe speaks, it's immediately recognizable as Patrick Warburton's voice, the exact same vocal performance he gave as the Tick. This isn't coincidence. Seth MacFarlane specifically cast Warburton to voice Joe, knowing full well that audiences would make the connection between the two characters. The question is whether this connection is just a fun casting choice or something deeper, an intentional hint that these two characters are actually the same person. Beyond the voice, Joe and the Tick share numerous physical characteristics. Both have massive muscular builds. Both possess exceptionally square jaws and pronounced chins. Both have similar facial structures and expressions. If you were to imagine the Tick without his blue costume, sitting in a wheelchair in suburban Rhode Island, he would look exactly like Joe Swanson. The physical resemblance is too strong to be accidental. Personality parallels. The similarities extend beyond physical appearance to personality traits. The Tick is known for his dramatic, over-the-top personality. He speaks in grand, heroic declarations. He takes everything extremely seriously, even mundane situations. He believes deeply in justice, heroism, and doing the right thing no matter how ridiculous the circumstances. He's earnest to the point of being comical, completely lacking self-awareness about how absurd he sounds. Joe Swanson displays many of these same personality traits. He's intensely dramatic about everything. When he speaks about police work, duty, or heroism, he adopts a grandiose tone that mirrors the Tick's style of speech. He takes his role as a law enforcement officer with deadly seriousness, even when the situations he faces are silly or mundane. He has the same earnest quality, the same lack of irony, the same belief that he's doing something important and heroic. Both characters also share an interesting relationship with their own capabilities. The Tick doesn't fully understand the extent of his powers or where they come from. He just knows he's strong and nearly indestructible. Similarly, Joe doesn't seem to question how he's able to do things that should be impossible for a paralyzed man. He just does them, as if his abilities are normal, as if everyone in a wheelchair should be able to fight crime and perform incredible physical feats. The impossible fighting abilities. The most compelling evidence for Joe being the Tick is his absolutely impossible fighting abilities. Joe is paralyzed from the waist down. He has no use of his legs whatsoever. By any logical medical standard, this should severely limit his combat capabilities. Yet Joe is portrayed as one of the most dangerous fighters in Quahog, possibly the most skilled combatant in the entire show. Joe can fight multiple opponents simultaneously and win. He's defeated armed criminals while confined to his wheelchair. He's engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Peter Griffin during their various conflicts, and Peter, despite his size and aggression, can't beat Joe. In the episode Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air, when Joe temporarily regains the use of his legs, he's shown to be even more formidable. But even in his wheelchair, he's already incredibly dangerous. Most remarkably, Joe defeated Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland simultaneously in a fight. 3 grown men, all larger than average, all attacking at once, couldn't overcome one man in a wheelchair. This isn't just improbable, it's physically impossible unless Joe possesses superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, or some other advantage that compensates for his paralysis. The theory explains these abilities through the Tick connection. The Tick possesses superhuman strength and near invulnerability. If Joe is the Tick, or if Joe has access to the Tick's powers through the costume or some other means, his fighting abilities make perfect sense. He's not just a paralyzed cop who happens to be good at fighting. He's a superhero with actual superpowers operating in Quahog while pretending to be an ordinary disabled police officer. The origin of the Tick's powers. In the Tick mythology, the source of the Tick's powers has never been fully explained. He appeared one day in the city, already super strong and nearly indestructible, with no clear origin story. He wears a blue costume, but it's unclear whether the costume grants him powers or whether he had powers first and then created the costume. This ambiguity leaves room for various interpretations. One popular theory about the Tick suggests that his powers come from the costume itself, that the blue suit is some kind of ancient or alien artifact that grants superhuman abilities to whoever wears it. If this is true, it explains how Joe could have the Tick's powers without always appearing as the Tick. Joe possesses the costume. When he wears it, he becomes the Tick, gaining enhanced strength and durability. When he's not wearing it, he's Joe Swanson, paralyzed police officer, but he still retains some residual abilities from his exposure to the costume's power. This would explain Joe's impossible fighting skills. Even without the full costume, even while in his wheelchair, Joe maintains enhanced reflexes, strength, and combat abilities from his time as the Tick. The costume has changed him fundamentally, made him more than human, and these changes persist even when he's not actively being the Tick. Why Joe became the Tick? According to the theory, Joe Swanson wasn't satisfied with being a regular police officer. Police work involves too much bureaucracy, too many rules, too many situations where the law prevents officers from doing what Joe considers the right thing. Criminals escape on technicalities. Evidence gets thrown out. Dangerous people walk free because of procedural errors. Joe, with his strong sense of justice and his dramatic personality, found this intolerable. So Joe created or acquired the Tick identity to dispense justice outside the constraints of the legal system. As the Tick, he could be the hero he always wanted to be, fighting crime without worrying about Miranda rights or proper procedure. He could protect people the way he believed they should be protected, with direct action and overwhelming force. Joe maintained his police officer job as his civilian identity, his mundane life in Quahog. But at night, or during his off hours, he donned the blue costume and became the Tick, prowling the streets looking for criminals to stop and innocent people to save. He led a double life, balancing his responsibilities as a cop and neighbor with his secret identity as a superhero. This double life would have been manageable until something went wrong. The injury that paralyzed Joe might have happened during one of his adventures as the Tick, not during regular police work as he claims. Perhaps he fought a particularly dangerous villain and suffered damage even his enhanced durability couldn't fully protect against. Perhaps the costume's power failed at a crucial moment. Whatever happened, Joe ended up paralyzed, unable to walk, and his career as the Tick seemed to be over. The accident explained. The show provides a confusing and inconsistent explanation for how Joe became paralyzed. In the episode A Hero Sits Next Door, Joe claims he was injured investigating a robbery at an orphanage on Christmas. He describes sliding off the roof while confronting a criminal dressed as the Grinch. But this story has been contradicted in other episodes, with different accounts of when and how Joe's injury occurred. These contradictions make sense if Joe is lying about the real circumstances of his injury. He can't tell people he was hurt while operating as an illegal vigilante superhero, so he invented a cover story about being injured on police duty. The details change because he hasn't kept his story straight, because the truth is more complicated than any single narrative he could create. The real injury might have involved the Tick costume or powers in ways Joe can't explain without revealing his secret identity. Perhaps the costume was damaged in whatever fight left Joe paralyzed, and this damage is why he can't heal from his injuries. Perhaps whatever entity or force grants the Tick's powers has limits, and healing spinal damage exceeds those limits. Perhaps Joe is being punished for misusing the costume's powers, condemned to remain paralyzed as a consequence of his actions as the Tick. Joe still has the costume. The theory suggests that Joe still possesses the Tick costume, hidden somewhere in his house. He can't wear it anymore, at least not in the full superhero capacity he once did. But he's kept it because he can't bring himself to give up on that part of his identity. The costume represents who Joe truly is, the hero he still believes himself to be, despite his disability. Occasionally, Joe might still put on the costume even though he can't walk. Perhaps the costume grants him temporary use of his legs, allowing him to be the Tick again for brief periods. This would explain the episode, Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air, where Joe does temporarily regain the ability to walk. The show presents this as stemming from an experimental nerve treatment, but it could actually be Joe accessing the costume's healing or enhancement powers, allowing him to walk again for a short time before the effect wears off. Even without wearing the full costume, Joe benefits from his connection to the Tick's powers. The residual enhancement from years of wearing the costume explains his impossible strength and fighting abilities. He's been transformed by exposure to whatever grants the Tick's powers, and that transformation is permanent, persisting even after he's lost the use of his legs. The healing potential. One of the most intriguing aspects of this theory is the possibility that the Tick costume could heal Joe's paralysis if used correctly. The Tick in his original series displayed remarkable regenerative abilities, healing from injuries that would kill normal people. If the costume grants these healing powers, it should theoretically be able to repair Joe's damaged spine. The fact that Joe remains paralyzed suggests either the costume can't heal this particular injury, or Joe is choosing not to use the costume's healing powers for some reason. Perhaps using the costume to heal himself would require a permanent transformation into the Tick, and Joe isn't ready to give up his life as Joe Swanson. Perhaps the costume demands some kind of sacrifice or payment in exchange for healing, and Joe has decided the cost is too high. Or perhaps Joe is trying to heal himself gradually, using the costume's powers in small doses to slowly repair the damage to his spine. His occasional moments of surprising physical capability, his ability to do things that should be impossible for someone with his injury, might represent progress in this healing process. Joe might be on a path toward eventually walking again, not through medical science, but through the superhuman powers of the Tick costume. Why keep it secret? If Joe really is or was the Tick, why hasn't he told anyone? Why maintain the secret, especially from his close friends? The theory offers several explanations. First, being a vigilante superhero is illegal. Joe is a police officer. If it became known that he was operating outside the law as the Tick, he would lose his job, face criminal charges, and possibly go to prison. His entire life would be destroyed. Even though he's not currently active as the Tick due to his paralysis, admitting he once was would still have serious consequences. Second, Joe's friends wouldn't understand. Peter is too stupid to grasp the concept of a secret identity or why Joe would risk his life as a superhero. Quagmire would probably make crude jokes about the costume. Cleveland, while supportive, wouldn't be able to keep such a massive secret. The only person who might understand is Brian, but Joe and Brian aren't close enough for such a revelation. Third, part of Joe's identity is tied up in being the brave disabled cop who doesn't let his wheelchair stop him. If people knew he had superhuman powers or access to the Tick costume, his accomplishments would be diminished. They would see his abilities as coming from the costume rather than from his own determination and strength. Joe's pride wouldn't allow him to accept that his achievements might not be entirely his own. The double life continues. The theory suggests that Joe hasn't completely given up being the Tick. Despite his paralysis, he still finds ways to be a hero, still uses what remains of his enhanced abilities to fight crime and protect people. His aggressive police work, his willingness to engage in dangerous situations, his tendency to use excessive force, all reflect his Tick mindset more than standard police procedure. There might even be occasions when Joe still puts on parts of the costume, perhaps the mask or gloves, to access more of the Tick's powers for particularly dangerous situations. He can't be the Tick full-time anymore, but he can tap into those powers when absolutely necessary. This would explain some of his most impossible physical feats, the moments when he does things that exceed even the remarkable abilities he normally displays. Joe lives in constant tension between his two identities. He's Joe Swanson, disabled police officer, family man, and neighbor. But he's also the Tick, or at least he was. And that part of himself hasn't gone away just because he's in a wheelchair. The dramatic personality, the intense commitment to justice, the impossible physical capabilities, all stem from his secret life as a superhero, a life he may not have entirely abandoned. The Family Guy universe's superheroes. If Joe is the Tick, it confirms that genuine superheroes exist in the Family Guy universe. The show has featured characters with superhuman abilities before, usually played for laughs or quickly forgotten. But a genuine superhero living among them disguised as an ordinary disabled cop suggests that the world of Family Guy is more fantastical than it appears. This opens possibilities for other characters having secret identities or hidden powers. If Joe is secretly the Tick, who else in Quahog might be hiding something? Could other neighbors have their own secret identities? Could there be other superheroes or supervillains operating in the town without anyone realizing it? The theory also explains some of the more absurd events in Quahog. The town experiences impossible situations regularly, faces threats that should destroy it, and survives circumstances that would annihilate a normal community. Perhaps Joe, operating secretly as the Tick, has been protecting Quahog all along. The family and neighbors don't realize it, but Joe has been fighting threats in the shadows, using his Tick powers to keep them all safe. The tragic hero. Viewing Joe as the Tick adds a layer of tragedy to his character. He was a superhero, someone who could walk, run, and leap into action to save people. He was nearly invincible, capable of incredible feats of strength and endurance. But something went wrong, and now he's confined to a wheelchair, unable to be the hero he once was. Joe's intense commitment to physical fitness, his obsessive exercising, his anger when people suggest he's limited by his disability, all make more sense through this lens. He's not just trying to stay in shape as a disabled person. He's trying to recapture what he lost, trying to rebuild himself into the Tick again. Every exercise routine is an attempt to become the hero he used to be. His frustration with his limitations, his occasional angry outbursts, his depression in episodes where he feels useless, all stem from knowing what he once was capable of and being unable to do those things anymore. He's not just a man who lost the use of his legs. He's a superhero who lost his powers, forced to watch the world need heroes while being unable to fully answer that call. Yet Joe continues fighting. Even in a wheelchair, even without full access to the Tick's powers, he refuses to give up. He trains constantly. He puts himself in danger. He protects his family and friends with everything he has left, because that's what the Tick would do. That's what Joe Swanson, former superhero, current police officer, eternal warrior, has always done and will always do. The wheelchair hasn't stopped him. Nothing will stop him, because deep down, he's still the Tick, still fighting for justice, still being a hero, even if no one else knows it. The theory transforms Joe from a simple disabled cop into a fallen superhero, a man who once stood among the most powerful protectors in the world, and now struggles with the limitations of a body that can no longer fully express the heroic spirit within it. His every achievement as a paralyzed man becomes more impressive when understood as the actions of someone who once could do so much more, someone who refuses to let physical limitations destroy the hero he knows himself to be. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Family Guy within American Dad theory. Family Guy, a TV show within a TV show. One of the most mind-bending theories about Family Guy suggests that the show isn't actually depicting real events within its own universe. Instead, Family Guy is a fictional television program that exists within the world of American Dad, Seth MacFarlane's other animated sitcom. According to this theory, the Griffins aren't a real family at all. They're characters in a TV show that Stan and Steve Smith watch in their living room in Langley Falls, Virginia. Every episode of Family Guy that viewers watch is simultaneously being watched by characters in American Dad, making Family Guy a show within a show, a fictional creation inside another fictional creation. The Stan Smith evidence. The most direct evidence for this theory comes from American Dad itself. In multiple episodes, Stan Smith makes explicit references to Family Guy as a television program. These aren't vague allusions or subtle hints. Stan directly discusses Family Guy as a show that exists in his universe, that he watches, and that he has opinions about. Most significantly, Stan has stated that Brian Griffin is his favorite fictional dog. This isn't a throwaway line, it's a specific declaration that establishes several important facts. First, Stan knows who Brian Griffin is, meaning he's familiar with Family Guy. Second, Stan refers to Brian as fictional, explicitly categorizing him as a character in a story rather than a real being. Third, Stan has strong enough opinions about fictional dogs to have ranked them and determined that Brian is his #1 choice. This statement only makes sense if Family Guy exists as a television show in Stan's world. Stan watches Family Guy. He's familiar enough with the show to have favorite characters. He discusses these characters the way people in our world discuss characters from shows we watch. To Stan Smith, the Griffin family is no more real than The Simpsons or any other animated sitcom. They're entertainment, fictional creations he watches on television. Steve Smith, Stan's son, has also been shown watching Family Guy episodes. In several American Dad episodes, the Smith family television displays scenes from Family Guy. Steve has been seen imitating Stewie Griffin, copying the baby's mannerisms, accent, and catchphrases. This imitation only makes sense if Steve is watching Stewie as a character in a TV show, mimicking a fictional character he enjoys. The fact that multiple members of the Smith family watch Family Guy and reference it as a television program strongly suggests that within the American Dad universe, Family Guy is indeed a fictional show. The Griffins exist as characters created by someone, actors playing roles, animations brought to life by artists and voice actors, but not representing real people or events. Inside Family Guy, the behind-the-scenes episode. The most explicit evidence from Family Guy itself comes from the episode Inside Family Guy from season 15. This episode takes the form of a behind-the-scenes documentary about the making of Family Guy. It presents itself as a look at how the show is actually produced, showing actors who play the Griffin family members, production staff who create the episodes, and the mechanics of how animated television is made. In this episode, we meet the actors who portray the Griffins. There's a man who plays Peter, a woman who plays Lois, and so on. These actors talk about their roles, discuss the show's production, and reveal details about what happens behind the scenes. The entire episode is structured as a mockumentary, a fake documentary showing the reality behind the fictional show. While Inside Family Guy is clearly satirical, meant to parody behind-the-scenes specials and poke fun at the show itself, it establishes within Family Guy's own continuity that the show might be a show within itself. The episode suggests that the Griffins we watch aren't actually a real family, but characters being portrayed by others. Even if this episode is meant as a joke, it creates canonical evidence that Family Guy exists as a fictional construct within its own universe. The episode also addresses the show's animation quality, production methods, and creative decisions, treating Family Guy as a deliberately created entertainment product rather than a documentary of real events. This metatextual approach reinforces the idea that the show is aware of itself as a show, that it exists on multiple levels of reality, and that what viewers see might not be the real story, but a fictionalized version of events. Back to the pilot, commentary on animation quality. Another key piece of evidence comes from the episode Back to the Pilot, where Stewie and Brian use Stewie's time machine to travel back to the very first episode of Family Guy. When they arrive in the pilot episode, they immediately notice and comment on the crude animation quality. They make jokes about how rough the animation looks, how the characters are drawn differently, and how the overall production values were lower in the beginning. This moment breaks the fourth wall in a significant way. Stewie and Brian aren't commenting on how people looked different in the past or how their memories have changed. They're specifically discussing animation quality, a concept that only makes sense if they're aware they exist as animated characters in a television show. Real people traveling back in time wouldn't notice animation quality because real people aren't animated. Only characters who know they're in a show would make such observations. This scene reinforces the theory that Family Guy exists as a television program within its own universe. Stewie and Brian have some level of awareness that they're characters in a show, that their lives are being animated and broadcast, and that the quality of that animation has improved over time. They're not just characters existing in their world. They're characters who know they're characters, who understand they exist within a creative framework designed and executed by others. The fact that Brian and Stewie can travel back to the literal pilot episode, the first episode of Family Guy as a television program, suggests that their world is bounded by the show's existence. They can't travel to times before the show began because those times don't exist in their universe. Their reality started when Family Guy started, and it's limited by the show's own narrative framework, the shared universe problem. American Dad and Family Guy are both created by Seth MacFarlane and exist within the same creative universe. Both shows occasionally reference each other, feature crossover elements, and share certain rules about how their worlds operate. This shared universe creates an interesting problem for understanding the relationship between the two shows. If Family Guy exists as a TV show within American Dad, how do we explain the occasional crossovers or shared elements? How can characters from American Dad reference the Griffins as fictional, while also existing in a world where those same characters sometimes appear? The theory offers several possible explanations. One possibility is that there are multiple levels of reality at work. The real version of Family Guy events happens in a universe parallel to American Dad, and there's also a fictionalized TV show version of those events that Stan and Steve watch. When characters from the two shows meet, they're interacting across these parallel realities. When Stan watches Family Guy on TV, he's watching a dramatized version of events that are actually happening somewhere else. Another explanation is that the crossovers themselves are fictional within the American Dad universe. When we see characters from both shows interacting, we're watching an episode of Family Guy that incorporates American Dad characters, and this episode is itself being broadcast as a TV show in Stan's world. The crossovers are special episodes that blur the lines between the shows for entertainment purposes. A third possibility is that American Dad exists on a higher level of reality than Family Guy. American Dad is real within the overall McFarlane universe, and Family Guy is a show that exists within that reality. Characters from American Dad can watch Family Guy because it's a TV show in their world, but characters from Family Guy can't watch American Dad because American Dad represents the actual reality that contains them. The actor interpretation. If Family Guy is a TV show within American Dad, it raises questions about what the real Griffins might be like, if they exist at all. Are there actual people or beings that the Family Guy show is based on? Or is the entire family purely fictional, created from scratch by whatever writers and producers made the show in the American Dad universe? The Inside Family Guy episode suggests there are actors who play the Griffin family members. These actors presumably have their own lives, personalities, and experiences separate from the characters they portray. The man who plays Peter Griffin goes home after a day of voice recording to his own family, his own house, his own reality that's nothing like Peter's. The actress who voices Lois has her own relationships, her own career, her own identity beyond the character. This creates a strange situation where the Family Guy we watch could be interpreted as the in-universe TV show that Stan and Steve watch, with the actors and production staff we occasionally see representing the real people behind that show. Everything else, all the adventures and situations the Griffins experience, is scripted fiction created for entertainment in the American Dad world. This interpretation explains some of Family Guy's more absurd elements: the impossible situations, the lack of consequences, the frequent deaths and resurrections, the way characters survive things that should kill them. All make sense if these events aren't actually happening, but are scripted moments in a comedy show. The Griffin family can experience anything because they're not real people constrained by real-world physics or logic. They're characters in a show, and the show's writers can do whatever they want with them. Why would Stan watch Family Guy? If Family Guy exists as a TV show in Stan's universe, it raises interesting questions about what that says about Stan himself. Family Guy is known for its crude humor, offensive jokes, and controversial content. The show pushes boundaries, makes fun of sensitive topics, and frequently includes content that many people find objectionable. What does it say about Stan Smith that he not only watches this show, but has strong enough opinions about it to declare Brian his favorite fictional dog? Stan is characterized as a conservative CIA agent with traditional values and a strong sense of patriotism. On the surface, he doesn't seem like the demographic for Family Guy's humor. Yet, he watches the show, knows the characters, and has favorites among them. This suggests that Stan's character is more complex than he appears, that despite his conservative exterior, he enjoys subversive humor and finds entertainment in content that challenges social norms. Alternatively, it could suggest that Family Guy within the American Dad universe is different from the Family Guy we watch. Perhaps the in-universe version of Family Guy is less offensive, more mainstream, or targeted toward a different audience. The Family Guy that Stan watches might be a toned-down, network-friendly version suitable for family viewing, very different from the actual show we see. Steve's interest in Family Guy makes more sense given his character. Steve is a teenager who's often portrayed as nerdy, obsessed with pop culture, and interested in edgy content his father wouldn't approve of. A show like Family Guy would appeal to Steve's sense of humor and his desire to watch something that feels slightly rebellious and adult. The cutaway structure. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags, random flashbacks, and tangents that interrupt the main story to show unrelated scenes. These cutaways are introduced by phrases like, "This is worse than the time," followed by a jump to a completely different scenario that usually has nothing to do with the episode's plot. The cutaway structure makes more sense if Family Guy is a TV show rather than a depiction of real events. Real people don't experience life with constant flashbacks to unrelated moments. Their conversations don't suddenly interrupt for 3-minute tangents showing something completely different before returning to the original discussion. This narrative structure is a television convention, a storytelling choice made by writers and editors. If Family Guy is a show within American Dad, the cutaways represent the creative decisions of the in-universe writers who produce Family Guy. These writers decided to structure their show around constant interruptions and random humor, creating a distinctive style that makes their program recognizable. When Stan and Steve watch Family Guy, they're experiencing these cutaways as deliberate comedic choices, understanding that the show's format intentionally disrupts narrative flow for humorous effect. The characters within Family Guy who introduce cutaways aren't actually experiencing these flashbacks. They're following a script that requires them to set up these gags. Peter doesn't really remember the time he did something ridiculous. The writers wrote a line for Peter to say that would introduce a funny scene, and Peter, the character, delivers that line as written. The floating timeline problem. Family Guy has been on the air for over 2 decades, but the characters haven't aged significantly. Stewie has been a baby for the entire series. Meg and Chris remain teenagers. Peter and Lois stay roughly the same age. This floating timeline, where events happen but time doesn't progress normally, is difficult to explain if Family Guy depicts real events. However, if Family Guy is a TV show within American Dad, the floating timeline is simply a creative choice made by the show's producers. Like The Simpsons or other long-running animated series, the in-universe Family Guy has decided to keep its characters at consistent ages rather than allowing them to grow older. This is a common convention in animated sitcoms, and it makes perfect sense for a fictional show to employ this technique. The floating timeline also explains continuity errors and contradictions. Characters forget things that happened in previous episodes. Events are referenced inconsistently. Details about character backstories change. If these are real people living real lives, such inconsistencies would be impossible. But if they're characters in a TV show that's been running for years with multiple writers and shifting creative direction, the contradictions are simply the result of different writers handling the characters differently at different times. American Dad as the higher reality. The theory positions American Dad as existing on a higher level of reality than Family Guy. American Dad is real in the sense that it's the primary universe, the actual world where actual events happen. Family Guy is derivative, a fictional creation within that primary universe. This hierarchy explains the relationship between the two shows and why references only flow one direction. American Dad characters can watch Family Guy and discuss it as fiction because that's what it is in their world. Family Guy characters can't watch American Dad because American Dad exists on a reality level above them. They're trapped within their fictional status, unable to perceive the real world that contains their show. This interpretation creates an interesting philosophical question about the nature of reality in the McFarlane animated universe. If American Dad is real and Family Guy is fictional within that reality, does that make the events of American Dad more legitimate or important? Are the characters in American Dad more real than the Griffins? Or are they all equally fictional from our external perspective as viewers? The theory suggests that there are layers of reality, with American Dad representing one layer and Family Guy representing a layer beneath it. But from our perspective as real-world viewers, both shows are equally fictional. We watch American Dad the same way Stan watches Family Guy. This creates an infinite regress of realities, each one potentially containing fictional shows that exist within it, all the way up to our own reality, which might itself be a show being watched by beings in a higher level of existence. The creative implications. If Family Guy is a show within American Dad, it changes how we interpret everything that happens in Family Guy. Every adventure, every joke, every moment of character development is not something that actually happened to real people, but something written, animated, and performed for the entertainment of people in the American Dad universe. This means the Griffins have no real agency. They're puppets controlled by writers and animators in Stan's world. Their lives, their relationships, their struggles are all scripted. They don't make real choices because they're not real people. They're characters following predetermined narratives created by others. This interpretation makes Family Guy darker in some ways and lighter in others. It's darker because it means the Griffins have no free will, no genuine existence beyond what's written for them. But it's lighter because it means their suffering isn't real. When terrible things happen to them, when they're hurt or humiliated or put through traumatic experiences, none of it actually matters because they're not real beings capable of genuine suffering. The theory forces us to reconsider our relationship with the show. Are we watching the same Family Guy that Stan watches, or are we watching a different version? Is the Family Guy broadcast in the American Dad universe identical to the one we see, or is there some difference? And if we're watching the same show Stan watches, does that mean we exist in a reality even higher than American Dad, looking down on multiple layers of fictional realities nested within each other? The Family Guy within American Dad theory transforms the show from a simple animated sitcom into a complex meta-narrative about fiction, reality, and the nature of existence itself. It suggests that the Griffins are trapped in a fictional prison, forever acting out stories for the entertainment of people in a higher reality, unaware that their entire existence is nothing more than a television program playing on someone else's screen. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.